Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the OPL Breakdown. My name is Scott Windows Monkey and I'm with my usual co-host, Nicholas General Mackenzie. And today's guest is a really exciting one. He is an LPL caster, Razleplasm. So Razleplasm's got a number of great qualities. He's been an ex-coach and analyst, so he's he's gonna know a lot about the game, right? He's a caster again, so it's his job to study the game. But really, the best quality that I think Raz has, and I think the best quality everybody should listen to Raz for, is he has a really nice voice. Like, just
Oh,
wait until he starts talking. Like after this intro segment ends, you guys are just gonna be like, I don't want Windows Monkey and Nick to talk. I just want the full Raz show.
see,
Um,
this is what I love. I've heard so many people compliment me on my voice, but I'm like, all right, let me listen back to one of my casts, or let me just like listen into just legitimately any recording of me, and I'm like, wow, this is disgusting. So, like, I
really,
guess I'm the only one that I actually just despises my own voice, but I guess no one likes the sound of their own voice, so I think that's fair. To me, that's like the living proof right there, I suppose.
yeah. I mean, I think everybody I've ever talked to has said like I love Raz's voice. Like you're
There we
very smart about the game also, but it's obviously very good bonus points to caster. So just a bit of an introduction on Raz for anybody who doesn't know who he is. So Raz was a coach and analyst at Dignitas at 2015 to 2016. Um, he then moved over to Oceania to do casting on the OPL and LPL in 2016. And then at the beginning of this year, he was sadly stolen away from all of us OPL fans to fully focus on the OPL. On the LPL in China.
go.
So it's a sad day for the OPL. But we've got you back on the show, so we can give the OPL fans what they want, right? Get you
That's
back
true.
talking
That's
about the
true.
OPL.
And just to hit on the whole Dignitas thing, because I was like 20, like that's a year sounds like, or at least that sounds crazy, right? But it was kind of like cut up in half in a sense, where I was working with Dignitas EU in the Challenger Series with, well, they're now spliced, but in the Challenger Series they were able to promote over. I then switched to the North American brand instead of like sticking with the EU as they went on to Splice. So then I went on in the LCS with the team. It was all a fantastic experience. I enjoyed it very much. Definitely a learning one for anyone
Definitely a
who,
learning one.
there we go. If if you went in there and spoiled yourself on the result of that one, I got you. You don't look no longer.
Well, we'll have plenty of time to chat about some of that and chat about how you got into casting later on. But we're
There you
just
go.
going to go through and start off with the topic one for the week, which is the OPL. So the format of the show for the OPL is we're just going to go through each of the series one by one, discuss some of the key points, what each of us thought of the series, um, and then kind of just some general things moving on from week one. Are there any like conclusions we come to or not? So starting off with the first series, the Direwolves versus the Chiefs. Um, so this was a very close series, right? Like, I mean, Direwolves
Yeah.
versus Chiefs, first match of the season. That's really exciting. Like, are there, I guess, any things which stood out from either team, for either of you guys, in terms of things that they did really well, or some weaknesses perhaps which led to them losing games or even the series in the case of Chiefs? Uh,
Okay. You go on first, actually. You'll go first.
All right. So when it came to the thing that I found the most interesting about Game One from Chase was Swiper picking up the cannon. I think usually when you think of Swiper, I mean everyone thinks about his tank play, his Maokai, his Nautilus, that sort of stuff. So it was like an interesting gambit for them to pick away the cannon, and it was quite evident in their draft that they wanted to get the priority top lane matchup with banning out the Jace hero, picking the cannon.
Yeah.
However, in the game, it didn't pan out whatsoever. Like, Chippies was still winning the 1v1 match up top, and if, Gragas is winning the 1v1 match up top, your cannon, AD cannon, split push cannon, is just gonna not do particularly well. And their whole, like, win condition sort of fell down in that game one, and it did reflect, like, game one wasn't a particularly close game at all. Like, it ended very quickly, like, sub 30 minutes. Chase barely got any kills. I think that was in a large part due to the fact that they put in a lot of faith in Swiper in the 1v1 matchup onto the cannon, but Chippy's had his number in that game, I feel.
Yeah, and I guess just to hit on that point, I remember one of my biggest takeaways. Yeah, he should be having a larger win in that matchup. I think until the breakaway and fight started happening, I think he was even, which shouldn't be. It should be like a 10 CS advantage or 20 in the Cannon's like side. I think he started playing back because I didn't see any jungle pressure up on that side of the map because they went towards Rakan. It was the Xayah Rakan lane, right? And so I was wondering where's the Talia pressure going to be output on the map? Is it going to be on the top side, which they picked for? In like an amazing matchup, right? Or is it going to be the bottom side with the Xayah Rakan? It was actually just going to be bot side. I felt like that was a riskier choice simply because Braum will more likely than not be able to turn that tide, and Vladimir, even though gets shoved in a little by Talia, he will be able to rotate towards the 3v3, and you don't want that 3v3 in my opinion. I think you just play towards the top side, and maybe Kennen will be looking to because I don't think there was a lot of Observer wasn't going top side more often than not. I think that if I were to give Swiper let's say a benefit of the doubt, I'd say that he's playing back because he's afraid of jungle pressure, right? Because if you die once in a Gragas lane or any tank matchup, it feels like you're fucked because then he purchases armor boots. He already has Doran shield or Doran's rings, and he just out sustains you, and he just out shoves you in roam or looks for TP. So I think perhaps he was playing like a bitch, or perhaps he just wasn't that was his first game or something. He's I wasn't doing out pressuring as I should have. But I definitely think Talia Lee Sin pressure should be going topside, and that just didn't happen. And then obviously there's that random fight in the river that just completely went in Direwolf's favor, and they had a team fight comp, and I was like, all right, well, so that game was going to be hard for them.
I mean, talking about that fight down in the bottom river, highlighting the Shinfire. So Shinfire is a jungler, very good at tracking the enemy jungler, and he was following Spooks around, right? And knew exactly where he was. And the moment the Spooks went in with his bot lane to make that play, he's just sitting there on the graves, counter ganks, and just picks up the kills. And like you said, the game is really tough from there. So yeah, I do agree with you. Perhaps looking to play more towards that top side could have been a better focus, and maybe like you said, where Swiper was playing back, maybe that's kind of what he's used to as a player, right? Like he normally plays a supportive role for his team, so he's used to just looking to avoid the ganks, not put down too much pressure, and just look to avoid dying to ganks while the other side of the map wins, right?
Maybe. It's so weird with the Chiefs because they change styles so often. I mean, it's probably fair because they've changed AD carries, right? And Raze is incredibly mechanically skilled, and beforehand it was Radier, and Radier was mechanically skilled, but near the end of his tenure, it's either that he dropped off or the team just played through topside, because there's that meta where he was just going into Alawi matchups 100%, and he was like a carry god in that, right? But then you're right that they're throughout his career he was more so he will be playing for the team, and he'll cop pressure, and he'll play tanks, right? And so that's probably a natural instinct, but I think in that game, I would have liked to have seen more. Maybe that's just up to let's say if Chippies was in that same situation, maybe he's calling for more pressure. Maybe he's a lot more aggressive in communication to get Lee Sin topside, or even if he doesn't care, he's maybe he'll just play aggressively anyways. And if he gets ganked, then he's hey, the ganks happen. I'm gonna go back into lane, play that much more aggressive, and that I'm already copying pressure, and maybe Lee Sin goes bottom lane and actually has a proper fight. So it does come to mindset, and maybe you're correct in the mindset that he's having, that he's just going to play back and not draw that much pressure in a matchup that he should be drawing.
Right. Okay, so something else which I wanted to talk about is Nidalee jungle from Shinfire in game 2. What do you guys think of Nidalee as a champion? Is Nidalee any good at the moment? Was it a good pick? What went wrong?
You go first again.
Yeah, I think that particularly the thing that was quite interesting about the Nidalee pick is that I think it's definitely a subpar choice. It's a B tier type champion. Just because she's a B tier champion, because she doesn't have a whole lot of hard CC. Her ganking pressure is very weak. So she's really heavily focused on winning the 1v1 jungle matchup. And into Elise, that's quite a difficult thing to do. Elise is probably one of the strongest junglers on the game, on the patch right now, especially in regards to winning jungle matchups. So I thought that that whole pick was very interesting, especially because there were no jungle bans. Like they could have easily just as easily, apart from the Zac, of course, because Zac is broken.
Yeah.
But they could have just as easily picked up the Lee Sin, picked up the Graves, picked up perhaps like a Gragas jungle, something like that. They could have. I think there were definitely other junglers they could have taken. Maybe like Direwolves as a team, they're quite confident in their ability to play, and maybe after seeing how well game one was going, they just decided, you know, these 1v1 jungle matchups are going really in our favor. Like Fire, quite honestly, put Spooks in the dumpster in game one on the Graves. So maybe it was just like Sharp saying, all right, I'm going to give you the Nidalee because you did a very similar thing that you need to do in Italy game one of just tracking the enemy jungler, killing him. However, I just think that they should have just picked the Graves again. Like Graves and Nidalee facilitate a very similar role in the team by clearing jungle camps, staying healthy, and invading and placing vision in. But Graves just does that better. Like he's got more upfront damage. He's a lot healthier in his clear. And I just think he's a better champion than Italy. So I thought that pick in particular was probably just cockiness.
Yeah. I also like. It's funny because Nidalee is a champion. It kind of sprouted up in popularity because of Cuz. I had to
Because of
read
Cuz.
because of Cuz from Longju, who just kind of like reinvigorated the pick in Korea, and so people just started to see it being played, especially the build, which was Athene's Unholy Grail into Lich Bane, which is like fun to see the champion back. It's really just difficult to bring the character, or at least champion in. I can understand it in Korea. I think in uh, like in regions that like especially week one, like because for OPL, like in regions that are kind of like need to build up teamwork a lot more, having a mid game or late game Italy is super hard to actually execute, and you turn into a support more often than not, and being able to like heal up your AD carry, get the attack speed going, and be able to just like weave in and out of a team fight, it's really difficult. So I think it was definitely them saying this is like a buffer game. And I think Camille is actually one of the picks that I would look at and say this is hard to really utilize because I understand the Jarvan got banned out, which made it harder for them to pick a champion that like is as flexible as a Camille, right? Because right now
Right.
Jarvan is basically like a better Camille. You have a stronger laning phase than Camille, and you can roam into the mid lane or have team fight impact like essentially what Camille does. And being able to go mid lane, EQ into ulti, a lot of damage, and just like utility as well. So Camille's effectiveness is once you like win out of a team fight, or like in let's say Baron or Dragon, then you can chase them down with hookshot because that's still a ridiculously low CD. I just think that Swiffer, if I remember, because I remember I watched this like yesterday or so, 2 days ago. He just took over the game as Cassio. I'm trying to like, was that
Yeah.
what happened? Okay, you
Yeah,
guys fill me.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Swiffer got really fed.
So
Yeah.
the early game, Chippy's like level 4 killed on Camille, and I was watching the game with Pabu.
Yeah.
Not with Pabu, with Papyrus, one of just a top laner in Oceania, and he was just telling me about how bad the Camille matchup is for Rumble. And then when he solo killed, he was like losing his mind about like how bad that solo kill is and how it shouldn't happen whatsoever. However, and then so when then we were just like, alright, Direwolves win the game. Like it doesn't really matter, Camille's ahead. And then Swiffer Spooks, the good old two-man Chiefs combo, in conjunction with
yeah.
Egypt, they just continually roam mid. They get 3 kills on Fantix on the mid lane, and then from
Yeah.
there, Swiffer has pressure. And then, but I think the real story of the game is just Raze on the Xayah.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember the fight in top lane where it was like 3v5, and I was like, wow, Chiefs of Throne. And then Raze just like it gets a pentakill 3v5. That was like actually an insane game from Raze and really utilized the Xayah pick. But I do think that Direwolves' draft was a little bit lackluster just because like Camille and Italy, they're subpar picks, and I didn't really necessarily feel like they were forced into those subpar picks, like particularly in the Nidalee pick. Like there were so many other junglers open that the Nidalee pick wasn't like necessarily needed. I think it was just more or less a bit cocky from Direwolves, which does happen time to times.
It's
So
probably fair.
Okay, so I guess the final thing from this series, like, do you guys think that Direwolves were the deserved victors in this series? Do you guys think that Direwolves coming like watching the series is a better team than Chiefs, or do you think we could see, perhaps a tilt later on if we see them again later on in the season? We'll start
Uh,
with Raz, I guess.
yeah, I think that Direwolves are like definitely showcase them to be better. If I were to talk about my tips, because like OPL has a whole tips thing where you just like essentially guess who's going to be coming out as the victor. I had it as 2-1 in favor of Chiefs, which is an underdog situation because Direwolves obviously went to MSI. And I actually thought they performed, or at least in the first set, I thought I was incredibly surprised at how well they performed, even though they started like racking up losses. Just to hit on their MSI point too, because I guess I didn't have the opportunity to talk about that on any forum, I suppose. It was that I thought that Schernfire played incredibly well abroad, and I was really surprised about that because obviously, like, um, he had a bit of competitive experience in North America, and then he comes in, I believe, like halfway through the split, like sharing spot with Sybil, right? And then he comes in, goes on abroad, of course, has like the whole talks a lot of trash, like good trash. I love to see trash talking. I think people need to do that more, even though it gets them a little bit under like in a hot spot. But then he like did his usual thing. He tracked enemy jungle, put them in a proper position in a lot of scenarios, and then there were just like a few mess ups that happened across the map that like can cost you the game if you don't know how to bring yourself back. And there are some teams that, like for instance, like Chinese teams, if you find yourself in a 10k deficit, they'll find ways back because they're a little crazy and they'll just TP across. But that's something that teams have to, I think they have to learn how to play behind. But that's just another issue entirely. Like my expectation going into this set, because I guess I'm trailing off, was that Chiefs obviously lost, went like in fourth place or so, which is ridiculous. They went to Korea, probably just playing solo queue, which is not that much, but it felt like they had a much more like a chip on their shoulder going into week one. Meanwhile, Direwolves probably had like a vacation, if I heard correctly, which was needed because you just come from MSI. So the fact that Direwolves still came into week one and performed that well, and honestly, I love their pick ban because their pick ban was very much structured towards team fighting. It was simple to execute, other than game two, which was a little bit more difficult. Game one and game three were simple to execute, and they did. And even though game three, Chiefs had like a lead early on and should have won that game, they just did not play to their pressure points well enough. And so one mistake that's made, and then guess what? Like Vladimir takes over the game. So I thought that 100% Chief. I thought that Direwolves had a better composition or that they were able to execute on, and I thought they just had a better individual players on the day.
yeah. I thought, yeah, particularly Fantix impressed me in the mid lane. Like picking up the Vladimir, and Swiffer is the main like carry of Chiefs, and taking him on 1v1 and keeping him in the mid lane. In the games they won, I thought was a particularly impressive feat that he did. And then the rest of Direwolves' map is just, I think, far stronger than Chiefs, and because Fantix was able to mitigate Swiffer's effectiveness, it did just show that Chiefs are, especially in the team fighting phase, weaker than Direwolves, and the team fights happened, they lost the team fights, Ejim got picked out a few times on the Lulu.
Yeah.
Which was a bit questionable, and I think Scott will jump into it before, about the whole Lulu pick, but he finished the game 0-6, and you get caught out enough times, you lose enough objectives, and Direwolves are just a good enough team to be able to punish you on that one. But yeah, the Lulu pick, Scott.
Oh yeah, the Lulu pick. So I think Ejim is really good when he plays Thresh, when he plays Rakam, when he plays engaged champions. Like, you remember Ejim from like, back when Legacy went overseas and Ejim was on the team, right? Like the Alistar, these engaged champions. When they put him on Lulu, like in the gauntlet against Sin, 5 games on Lulu, and I think he underperformed all 5. I think you just please, Chiefs, just put this man on the engaged champions. He does incredibly well. Like that Thresh in game 2 was so good.
Yeah, my take on that is like on the Lulu game, because he definitely racked up deaths. I thought that with the strong enough pressure that they had early on in the game, I actually thought that because I guess the typical meme when it comes to Chiefs is like, Chiefs macro play, right? Their macro play is impeccable, like best in Oceania, theoretically, but that was just like really bad. They definitely needed because their composition was inferior team fighting wise. Like they had sure they had Ivern, they still had LeBlanc, and I think LeBlanc for me, if she's going to be on Sidewave and she has like majority of the kills, fight around LeBlanc. Don't fight away from LeBlanc. If LeBlanc is just getting to bottom side of the map and they choose like a 2v2 skirmish or something top side, you're probably not going to be making the most effectiveness out of that. But then when LeBlanc is on the top side pushing in, oh Jesus, I thought I was no, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry. But yeah, if LeBlanc is in top side pushing into like tower against Vladimir and harassing him, why is no one in like invading in blue side jungle and putting in popper wards, right? They only did that when LeBlanc was pushed out, and then when like Lulu was starting to finally get envision, obviously gets picked up because you don't have the window of pressure anymore. So that was just like bad timing coming out of Chiefs to actually put in their vision, and it showcased like so. With that whole point of like the meme, it's definitely a lot more easier to execute around like Thresh or like Alistar. If EGM who knows when to engage, if you give him the power to, he will do so. But in that situation where he has like a good team fighting champion, or like for instance like Karma is always something he gets like criticized on, like put him on a Karma or a Trundle. I mean, but that's a while back. I'm going on the Karma. Like if you have lane pressure, he plays the lane well and then gets into mid game and late game, and the team just does not play around that pressure well, or at least the pressure of the champions. And it's like for him, he's probably gonna be like, yeah, I probably should have played Thresh because my team is like they're playing like monkeys or something. like like essentially, if that's like the problem, then sometimes it's almost as easy as just picking up an engaged champion, but that puts you at a skill cap because then you're just accepting your team not being able to hit points that when they get to international, they will obviously have problems in. So I would much rather him play Lulu or Karma, not in this meta because Thresh is actually good in this meta, but if it is meta and if it is good in that situation, you just have to have your team play better. And I thought they were just not playing well that game.
All right, there we go. The advice from Rez: play better, Chiefs. All right, I like it. I like it. I'm just kidding. All right, well, unless there's anything else you guys want to say, we okay to move on to the Regicide versus Abyss series?
Yep.
Yeah, I will say, just to kick that off, that is the best, like, just the set we just talked about was the best set of the week. So, like, the
Oh,
rest of it's just going to be a tough one from that point forward. So, just buckle in, everybody. Have a good one.
The show's over.
Yeah.
we just ended. We just all leave. Like, oh man.
Oh, they'll miss out on the flame. So you kind of have to stick around.
Yeah, that's true. Well, to start off the flame, Regicide versus Abyss.
Okay.
Personally, I was very disappointed from Abyss in the series. So me and Nick, if you don't know, we both coached Abyss at different points, and Nick was a player for Abyss. I'm gold, so that never happened to me. But yeah, we were really disappointed. We thought this was going to be a 2-0. You know, Luch coming back. This guy was the rookie of the split in Split 2, and yeah, it just didn't really seem to happen, right, Nick? It just So I guess the question which I want to ask you guys, 2-1 series, were you expecting the first question? Sorry, were you expecting Abyss to win this one, and like were you disappointed with Abyss's performance, or do you think that we underestimated Regicide? So I guess we'll start with you, Nick.
Oh well, on the last show we did, I predicted Abyss to 2-0, sort of less blind because Regicide hadn't released a roster. But like the roster came together and it was they have name changes, but it's Paradise, so you may know him from Avant Garde, the Aurelia god. Jonathan, their mid laner in the OCS, who rolls up to jungle. Seaman, formerly X5 mid laner, who had a pretty good split up until he left X5. Jenny Boy, no offense, but probably the worst ADC in the OPL when he played OPL on Avant Garde. And K-pop, who played in Open Ladder, and I think he's like a Master Challenger support. So like, the Regicide roster is just like, damn, that top side. And the bottom lane is like a bit of why you guys in OPL, to be honest. So coming into the series, I thought it was going to be a 2-0 for Abyss pretty cleanly. Like Regicide are a much newer roster than Abyss. Abyss have been scrimming, which Regicide weren't. Abyss had bans, and they just didn't play as well as me as an Abyss fan, and I guess more involved in Abyss I was just very disappointed with it. But I guess we'll pass it over to Raz as well.
Yeah. See, what even surprised me with the Regicide point of not having bans is that they just decided, because the best thing about having less bans in that system is that sometimes the OP picks actually come your way, right? Like, not like the Gallios, the Zax, like sometimes you can actually have it, even though you get penalized, you can still pick it up. But for whatever reason, Regicide didn't pick it up. They just went towards like their Riven picks or something, right? And so like it's fun to see that, right? It's fun to see Riven, and I think that there's a place for Riven. It definitely showcased that it could work, but like Paradise, I would like to say is exactly like where I left off in like when he was on Avant Garde, where he is incredibly strong within the lane, but then when he gets out of it, like you can see the tunneling that comes through certain fights, like certain fights where he will all in, and even though you're like, you're not going to win that fight, he will still definitely try to like get a kill at like leaving. So I like the mindset. It's hilarious to watch, and then he'll probably end up winning a game in the OPL just based off of him carrying like he did on Avant. So it was definitely, I had this set as a 2-0 for Abyss, and the fact that it went to all 3 games it's crazy. Was a little insane, especially with Abyss getting some ridiculous compositions. And Luch being back, like Luch is a ridiculous player, like actually an insane player, but nah, it didn't work their way.
I mean, Luch is it just didn't happen for me on Sunday. Like not that he played bad,
Yeah.
by all means, but I felt like there was something missing from his play. Maybe it's just because he's been out for a whole split. You know, it's going to take him a
Yeah.
while to warm back up. Like he was just in team fights, you know, getting caught by early CC, dying instantly, and you know, Raid being forced to pick up the slack in a lot of those team fights. So it's very surprising from Luch. But you know, like I said, maybe there's he's been out for a very long time, so maybe he's going to take a few weeks to warm back up to competitive play. I did actually want to touch on something that Nick mentioned though, where he said about so apparently, not sure if this is true, but apparently Regicide hasn't been scrimming, and apparently they just sort of like just play OPL, which I guess is a big testament to how good like Paradise Suman are, right?
Yeah. The management tweeted out like there was some hot. I mean, Raz, you said you liked the trash talk. There was some hot banter between before this game. Like Regicide's coaching staff was saying how the game was going to be ridiculously easy. Pabu was saying his disdain for Regicide. They come into the game, they win game 1, and then it was the game. Let's actually talk about the game 1 because we're we're talking a lot about Abyss, and their game 1 was a very, very clean game. It was a game that you want. Like they, as Raz said, they picked up this like ridiculous comp with the Galio, the Elise, the Syndra, the Varus. They flex the Zac to bottom lane, which is hilarious. Just to secure all the power picks, and they played the map really, really well in this game. Like they got the bot lane dive, they rotate around, they get all the towers, and they win the team fights they need to. There was only one hiccup in the mid lane, and other than that, the game was extremely clean. And it just came as like Abyss, I think, have stronger players than Regicide, except for Paradise. And then it showed through and they were just, you know, they had the scrims as well, so the macro play was better in the game 1. So game 1 was how it should happen, but everything just fell apart in game 2 more or less.
Yeah, game 2 they had good fights, or at least they had the setup for the fights, but then of course you'd have like those 2v5 or 3v5 situations where like ZZZ or like Paradise and Suman would just wipe them, like just with the Vladimir pick. And so I think that they were definitely, I don't know if I would say that they were disrespecting the team. It's always hard to tell on week 1 just to see how they play up against other teams and how they decide to play up against Regicide. But with the fights that they picked, they were like, okay, it seemed like it would be good if it's an in and out situation, but they stuck around long enough for Vladimir to join up. And the thing about Vladimir with items, of course, and I've seen this a lot in LPL situations where it's like if you fight a Vladimir and he's like and the Vladimir's team's like 10k gold behind, he's still gonna be able to wipe your team, and if he gets an opportunity to have like 2 more rotations of his spell. And I thought that like Baron, like Regicide, by the way, they were definitely a lot more. They weren't
I wasn't afraid.
like, for instance, they were not afraid. Exactly, they were not afraid to pick fights. They were not afraid to start up Baron. So like if Abyss were behind, they actually had to respect the Baron threats coming from Regicide, and that is a good that's a good thing, obviously, because it just showcases what Regicide is willing to do in the next few weeks. Because once they actually have like good macro under their belt, perhaps like if it happens, if they actually play scrims, then it just showcases like that kind of shot calling will carry over. So I think that's like a good point, even though Regicide lost this set, was simply because like was just simple that like that point that they can push forward into the next set. So like that's a good thing to take away from it, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it was really impressive, like some of that team fighting which came out from them. I know they did pick strong team fighting champions, but executing extremely well. There was something you mentioned earlier on, which was like Regicide not really conforming to the OP picks, in the case where they had no bans. So I kind of want to talk about those two OP picks. I'm assuming you mean like Zac and Galio, right?
Yeah.
Where I believe neither of them got picked by either team. Like they didn't go through the entirety of pick ban, and then Abyss lost with Zac Galio in game 2. So do you guys, I mean, for starters, you guys think these picks are OP, right? Like, but do you think that maybe these teams just aren't at a high enough level to utilize the picks properly? Like, what went wrong with the Zacking and the Galio, and why do you think teams were ignoring them in game 3?
Ooh.
I think
Um,
Abyss
you go on.
panicked a little bit after the game too, because they came in like I mean Scott and I we talked to the OPL players. They were coming in like they were coming in confident, and I think they were coming in rightly confident. Like they were scrimming. They were scrimming before. They've got Luch back. Rosie coming in for support as well. They were confident. And then the game 2 they lost, and you could see it in their eyes. They were not at all ready to lose. That second game, and so maybe and then when they came into the Galio Zac, I think the specific thing about that is that I doubt Abyss had any practice with Zac and Galio in the same team comp.
True.
They did have practice with Galio in isolation and Zac in isolation. Like I just know that. However, Zac and Galio is a combination. Like in scrims, pick and ban from my experience is relatively normal to OPL. Like a lot of teams don't just like lose all their bans or whatever. So very unlikely that they would have just gotten Zac and Galio in the same game. So they're probably coming into this game with no practice on Galio and Zac specifically, which maybe they did tunnel on those picks because the composition that they had was very, very focused around team fighting, the fights and stuff like that. But the fights didn't go their favor, like with the Zac and Galio, and maybe that was because of the lack of scrims they had with those two champions.
That's probably fair, and I definitely like when you get into game 3, you don't want to go towards picks that you're like not comfortable with. So you could see like Elise on like for Seb, that's 100% a comfort pick, and Elise is a band like always like a purple side band too, and so it makes sense that they'll go to comfort. I know from my personal like experience when it comes to scrims, like I remember when Rise was like the most broken piece of shit champion for about like meta upon meta. And when you get into a competitive game where Rise is open, is like, do we want to pick this? Like, sure, it is incredibly overpowered, but we have not had a scrim with this champion. Maybe like 1 day's worth just to try it, but like, especially when you get into game 3, you don't want to put it out there. And even if it's like not banned by you, you're like, all right, we would rather pick around it, hopefully. So like, there's that nervousness as well, so I can understand it. And they still get Elise for what's it called, for Seb, and they probably just didn't think that the Zac would be picked up by Regicide because it wasn't picked up before.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that's actually a really good point. Bans in scrims in Oceania. I don't know if it's the same over in China or in NA. But yeah, like the OPs generally get banned like every game, so it's really hard to practice them. Possibly a strategy from Regicide? I don't know. If it was, it definitely worked for them in game 2, right? But yeah, be unusual. But I mean, this team is unusual, right? Like they just show up to OPL, do their own thing. Like they they like breakthroughs. Like you put the meta in front of them and they just like scrunch it up and they're just like, nah, we're doing our own thing. We got Riven. We got our own champs, right?
Something that I think Regicide have an advantage of against other teams is that all the other teams are coming in with expectations of themselves. They're coming in with a fair amount of backing financially, like Regicide are not committing to a gaming house, that sort of stuff, but all the other teams are, and there's a significant financial investment all the teams are making, and with that financial investment comes pressure from the org, but Regicide have none of that pressure. And I know coming from being a player myself, I played a lot better when there wasn't pressure under me, and so perhaps Regicide are... for instance, when it comes to a 50-50 Baron, Regicide will start that 50-50 Baron and just go for it, whereas like Abyss probably won't go for that 50-50 Baron because of the pressure that they have, that they feel they need to win, and that they should win that game. Whereas Regicide, they're very aggressive. They don't necessarily... They want to win, obviously, but it's not necessarily like as much of a pressure they need to win. Whereas Abyss, they're coming in into the general consensus of the community was that Regicide, they should be able to beat them, especially because Abyss are shooting towards that top 4. They need to be able to beat Regicide fairly handily, and Regicide, they're coming in with first split in the OPL, let's just try and stay in the OPL. So I think there are a lot less expectations on Regicide, which means that the players are more enabled to play more aggressively, and which suited the way that Regicide likes to play.
Especially week 1, right? Because the pressure, if you're like a Regicide, you'll get that pressure like later on when you start to feel like promotion relegation pressure. But like week 1, you just go in and you just have fun. Like, especially if you have the competitive experience before, like Paradise and Seaman, they could just play as they usually do because it's not like their first set on stage.
And heck, like maybe this team like does look to finish towards that 6th place, you know, like they were very competitive against Abyss, you know, maybe against teams like AV, you know, especially Tainted Minds as well. Maybe they look to finish above them and dodge out their relegations. Who knows? All right, so we'll move on to the next series. So we've got Legacy versus Sin. So before we kind of like go through the games, or I guess in relation to the games a bit as well, I want to talk about this new top laner. I'm not sure if I want to pronounce that. Is it Dokla?
Yeah, Dokla.
Yep. For me, from what I've heard in streams and then watching OPL, he seemed very similar to Flares, right? Like playing, you know, aggressive bruiser champions, like, you know, working with his team very aggressively. Like, it seemed to just slot right into Sin Star, right?
See, okay, I don't know have you seen him in stream? Or I guess I see. I'll be the man who isn't cheating. maybe
You mean the man who isn't cheating?
Like maybe, because I was incredibly surprised by the Dokla acquisition. I mean, probably everybody was, but mostly because I didn't see him on the ladder. Now he said he was like 14 in NA or 7 in NA. I don't know what rank he was. So that was just me being blind apparently, because I was like, wait, who's Dokla? Like apparently he was in uni LOL, right, for in NA. So that's a pretty big acquisition. But you would have to do a lot to fill in Flair's shoes, obviously because he performed so well last split, but also because I felt like Flair's coming in brought in a lot of competitive experience to his team, and also just based off of the confidence he's able to show in day 1, where he was in the LCS. He's been like in every other team as well. He's like that man. Let me tell you a story about this guy. You know who I got relegated by? Flares. That's who. That guy,
you actually?
Yeah, he was actually the top laner of I think it was
TDK.
TDK. Yeah. So, but yeah, he's incredibly confident. He's a carry style player. He knows what he wants, and he calls for it because he's been in those situations before, and so that's what like Flares brings that. And I don't know if Dokla, obviously, like this is his first week. But he has a large shoes to fill for basically no information that I had on him.
Right. See, I see what your strategy is, though. Right. See, you got relegated by Flares, right? So you're saying no, this top laner nowhere near as good as Flares. Flares is this absolute god. There's no way any team can
Can't touch him. Can't touch him. Yeah, otherwise, if he is the most touchable top laner, then I am screwed. Personally, I am done. It's over.
I love it. All right, what about you, Nick?
On Dokla, Yeah. So for like I was able to find his account on the NA Challenger. He was like
Mm.
top 15. And he had a ton of Jace and a ton of Fiora games. And I remember looking at Flares when he came in, and he had a ton of Jace and a ton of Fiora games, and I was
Yeah.
like, damn. And I was like, wait, I've seen this before with Dokla, and then he came in.
Flashbacks.
Both Jace and Fiora were open. Dokla didn't pick them, like he went for Jarvan, Galileo, and the Shen, but he still looked quite uncomfortable, especially in the laning phase. Like, we saw it in game 3 from Chiefs against Swiper, and I think Chippies is just far superior of a laner than Swiper. But even then, Swiper was able to build a significant CS advantage at 10 minutes against the Jarvan as Rumble, whereas Dokla against Tally, and admittedly Tally, I think Tally's weaker of a player than Swiper. I think Tally's playing a lot weaker than he did when he was gaining a lot of I guess notoriety when he at the end of last year for his like Echo play. Anyway, against Rumble on and 10 CS at 10 minutes, he was even on Jarvan, which shouldn't happen at all. And I was like looking at him and I was like, damn, this Dakolas guy's actually got like a lane on him. Like, if you can CS evenly against a Jarvan, against Rumble as Jarvan, that's something that like Sin should take. It's like, alright, Dokla is a good laner, and they should be able to look forwards. And that was like something I was a bit worried for with Sin, because Flares was such a dominant force in the laning phase that Dokla needed to it needed to also be a force in the top lane in the laning phase to actually allow Sin to play their same style. And I mean, Sin did still play their same style. Like, there were just a ton of kills in games 1 and 2. There were so many fights where Scott and I were scratching heads like, why is that fight happening? It's just like, Sin just saw a fight and they're going for it. Legacy bought into that style. There were more fights. And it was just a very entertaining series to watch, but it seems like Sin are the same team. I think Docker is, just weaker than Flares at the moment. Because Flares was just such a big player for them. So, I think Sin are just weaker, especially because, like, Legacy, they beat them last bit. But overall, Sin are still the same. It's the same team. They're still extremely scrappy, extremely aggressive, and they're going to be playing the same style with a weaker top laner.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think there was that one time when Jarvan when he was like caught in river because of Juice's position. You can tell that there was just some communication errors between the two of them, so that's just gonna hopefully get evened out. But the fact that that communication issue has to get rustled out for the split makes it tough for Sin because yeah, sure they're gonna be going international soon. Hopefully that makes it a little better for them that they can hammer that through. But if they want to go to Worlds, if they like want to get internationally or have that hope, they need to be able to communicate with each other. That's just a small bit, but I agree with you on Dokla in that, with the expectation that people will naturally be having, wasn't so much impressed with the laning phase, but also just not impressed with the team fighting, as when he's playing like tanks. Like when he was playing Galio, I think after the game people said that his team fighting was incredibly strong, or just like the reason why they won, and that might be true because that's like typical Galio team fighting, but he would like get canceled out in his ultis like 2 or 3 times in one game, or he would just start out the fight with an ulti rather than looking to just zone with the taunt slash like damage reduction. And so a lot of these fights were like actually super hard for FBI to be able to get autos across. And I was just like, wait a minute, why is it hard for your team to be able, like your backline, to push up and and have space when you have Zach and Galio, which is the same discussion we've had before. Like, it's just like, but this time around it was really skirmish heavy, scrappy, like team fights that had like bad introduction to the fights, like bad entrance in these fights, and it ended up with like Sin winning out one of the games. I think it was like game. I'm trying to remember which game they
Game
had.
2.
Yeah, it was game 2 for him, and that was when he was on Varus. FBI was on Varus, and it should have been a very easy game for them, especially with like the lead that they had across them. But nope. Apparently that 9K gold or 6K gold lead just meant absolutely nothing for Sin Gaming. Like they won, but it was so hard. It was like the hardest team fights to be able to get across. And so like if they have that much struggle beating Legacy with that large of a gold lead and with that composition, they will need some time. Like, and I think that their next 2 weeks will be super hard. I actually just don't even, like, I don't know where they will land. But hopefully their next their schedule for the next 2 weeks are like really easy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can definitely see your point there. Like, yeah, that game two was very scrappy. Like, especially with how fed they got earlier, right? Like, Ryoma in particular in that game was he's just running around the map everywhere, and Latalia just killing everyone. And yeah, you're right. It did take a long time to close up. So I know this is probably going to be a little bit premature in the season, but you talked a little bit about how they're going to need to do a lot to succeed later on this, like in this second split. Like, are we going to see that Cinderella story happening again? Like, are we going to potentially even see a Sin at Worlds, or is that kind of a dream too far away?
Yeah, see, last split I didn't even believe it. I only believed it when they took down the Chiefs, right? At that point, everyone is already like on that bandwagon. So I was just like tailing behind, running behind that bandwagon as fast as I possibly could, because I was like, I guess this is happening. It's like, but this time around, it feels so much harder because yeah, they don't have the carry. Like I say, they don't have the carry side. They still have FBI and Ryoma who are incredibly strong, but I think that those two players they really need um, structure around them, right? And in this set, I saw times where Ryoma was popping off alone, like literally just Talia ulting alone, just getting one pick alone. I didn't see Talia ulti being used by like as utility at all to like cut them off from turrets, being used by like to push in. And that's another point, by the way. This is the same game they had Galio and Zach, and this is why I look to this game and say, wow, this is why I had like no faith, because they had so many tools to be able to push forward with the goal lead that they had. So I guess just to round it out and answer your question, I think that it will be a longer road than it was last split. I don't have faith, but obviously it's week one and a lot can change. Sin has made those random changes before.
I mean, to give Sin some credit, last split they went 2-1 against Abyss, and I mean that Abyss the way they played at the start of the split was pretty shocking, and they still went 2-1, still managed to take a game from Sin, and then Sin came back and they finished third. So probably we maybe don't count out Sin, but if they continue to play the way they did in this game, it's unlikely they're going to be able to have the same success that they had last split towards the end of the season. But I mean, we'll see. It's alright. We got week one. We'll see how Sin turns out.
Mm.
Okay, and I guess the absolute final thing for the series, can we draw any conclusions from Legacy? Should Legacy have not been dropping this game to the Sin roster, or how is Legacy looking really going into next week? Because I think they have is it Legacy that has a tough matchup? I'm not sure.
Legacy against AV.
Oh right.
AV, okay.
For me, for Legacy, I think Lost is an incredible player. Like he went extremely hard in the games they won on Zai, like 8-1-6, 8-0, and 7. Like he just did so much work. And then the rest of the map, I felt like particularly Claire in the game 2 on the Oriana. He left a lot to be desired, especially with his shockwaves. Like he got solo killed by Roma in the mid lane, which shouldn't happen as Oriana versus Talia. His shockwaves, like he missed so many shockwaves in these team fights, and you just like the rest of Legacy need to step up individually. Like they cannot just keep relying on Lost to carry them, because if they want to be able to beat the new Direwolves, the rest of Legacy have to step up, especially their solo laners, Claire and Tally. Like I was talking about Dockler before, saying he's got a laning phase on him when he went even on Rumble versus Jarvan. But I mean that also has to do with Tally. Like Tally needs to be winning those sort of matchups in order for them to be able to be competitive against Direwolves. So Legacy team wise, like Sin just drove everyone down to level, but Legacy team wise, I think they've got very strong macro play, and credit to Carbon and Soulstrikes for that one. But their individual play, particularly Claire and Tally, I think a lot of the time they leave a lot to be desired when you compare them to Fantix, to Jippies, to Swiffer, those types of players. So with Legacy, if they don't pick up individually, I don't think we'll be seeing them at Worlds.
Okay. Let's see. That's a big one. I think for me, when it comes to legacy, the improvements I think they can make, um, hmm, I think it kind of starts with, I guess, funny. I would actually go in the opposite direction in a sense, because I think that they obviously like they have the individual players. Like maybe they didn't perform in one game or two, like in this series. I thought that they had good drafts in, I believe in two of the games, two of the three games. Um, the new pick was a surprise to me, and I think one of the bigger points of what they can improve on going forward is just backing the invades from Carbon, because Carbon is a pretty headstrong like individual, right? And he more often than not looks to invade. Most of the time he's a cheesy jungler. I think that's like a point to hit that happens from time to time. Um, but they need to all in on certain strategies that he outputs, because in the lane I actually like a lot of the players, and sometimes like for instance the Fiora pick was one that like stood out to me where I thought that was incredibly creative. I thought it played out well, and there were a lot of lanes that were just naturally winning just based off of some of the picks that they had. But then there would be a lot of opportunities missed based off of not playing around Carbon. I think that should happen a lot more. They should just play around him more often. I thought that Cupcake did I think it was game one. Yeah, it was in game one. So like Cupcake did play around him one game in one portion of it, but it has to happen more often. And I think if they do that, then they are able to play out, or at least be able to compete against Direwolves. Because I think one of the major points or strengths of Direwolves is that they play around Sure and Fire very well.
Right. Okay. So I guess we'll move on to the next series. So Avant Garde versus Tainted Minds. Now this series was very interesting. You know how you said like in China, like a 10k gold lead sometimes can just not mean anything. Well, I mean this series was like China on steroids. Like it was crazy. Like I think after about like 20 minutes into game one, like Nick said, okay, I'm gonna come back for the start of game two. Comes back, oh Scott, the game's still going, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
like,
How about that?
what's going on? So I guess both games, AV built big lead in the early game, right?
Yeah.
What went wrong in the mid game? What happened?
Wait, do I have a
I
coin?
know.
Do I have a coin with me?
You have a
I
coin?
don't have a coin.
Oh, okay, coin. Okay, no,
Yeah,
that's all good.
just
Let
50-50
me
Baron.
start this off. Yeah, let me start this one because I love myself some 50-50 Barons. Some good old dig Barons, man. I know it's a meme that I love to. Wait, do I have my jersey out here? No, I do not. I do have the mouse pad. We're
You do
good.
have the mouse.
I have the mouse pad. We're fine with that one. So to
Vintage.
hit on that point, um, whoo. All right. Was it game one that they had the 50-50 Baron?
Yeah, it's game one.
Okay, because yeah, like they have. I guess to set it up, obviously, so the people out there probably just to be fresh in their minds, they were going towards Baron. They were on it. They were sticking on it for a long time because they got like a few picks off of it as well. So they had disengaged properly to get the picks, go right back onto it. Meanwhile, Predator just to split push on the bottom side of the map, going for inhib. And if you're on a timer like that, more often than not, it's probably better to be safe. Like, it is probably better to just be safe on that because you're risking a lot for that 50-50. Or just zone the man out. With how low they were in the pit, you shouldn't even be making that judgment call. Because if you are that low in the pit, you're probably not going to have enough time to sort of like to play the Baron game, or at least like stall out for a certain number, or zone him out. And they didn't even have the ward to zone out only. Like they didn't even know where he was. So that was pure 50-50, where they were just gambling, and never gamble like that. Cause yeah, that like 5 seconds of just poof, your gold gone. Like what? What is that?
Oh man.
Yeah.
So yeah, they should have had like one person to leave the pit to deal with them, but the reason why that's not viable in that specific situation is that if that one person leaves, then they just like don't have damage or don't have tank for the Baron, so they should have just backed away after the few picks, and then they would have been able to reset for that exact same situation, because Tainted Minds were so far behind, they would have like legitimately kept losing towards that Baron fights.
Yeah. I think
Nick?
I got a tweet up from Pinch, their coach, which I think that was like quite funny, and it does show that AV recognized their problem. It was just like the inner meme tweet with the Kermit the Frog was like, continue to get lane priority, translate into jungle control, and eventually take Baron through correct picks and wave manipulation, and inner me, start the Baron. So, I mean, like, there's obviously, like, immediately after the game, they were just, like, recognize the issue with the game, because something else that I would like to talk about with Avant Garde was that the early game, last split in particular, was, like, the thing that I felt like left a lot to be desired, which is why they swapped out Sybil, swapped out Shelby for Sybil. And by bringing in Sybil, they brought in like a much stronger early game jungler, a lot more mechanical jungler, and it didn't really pay off for them. Obviously, they lost to Sin, and it seemed like there was a big disconnect between Sybil and the rest of the team. However, this game, like both games, AV had really strong early games. Sybil was playing really well around Ceres' pressures, particularly on the Renekton game. And I think that if AV, obviously they recognize their issues and they clean up that mid game that was traditionally a strength for theirs, the mid to late game. With their new early game that's a lot stronger around Sybil, AV are coming in like a lot stronger than I thought they were going to. So if AD can clean up that mid game, like Baron specifically, they keep their strong early game, I think that they are going to be that fourth place force that everyone needs to be questioning about, particularly with Abyss and Sin more or less dropping the ball.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I agree with you on that one because I respect Finch. I think I met up with him. I forgot the last time I communicated with him. It was definitely in person. It was like one of those Riot get-togethers before the split. It's like everybody to be toxic. Rule number one. I forget what it's called, like a conference thing. Anyways, like he's a really smart individual. He's a really calm individual, and that's what you need as a coach. Obviously, don't know anything else just because I talked to him once. So I liked the first interaction I had with him, and I felt like the players on the team are all strong, right? Jake is a strong shot caller. Sybil is someone who's like top 3, top 4 jungler in this in the region, and he's only getting better, which is freakish. Triple is like just based off this series alone, I liked his confidence in certain matchups, like the Echo versus Syndra, which is good for Echo obviously, but like it still should be tough in the first like 4 levels, but he would just outright trounce the matchup with a little bit of help. But that's just Avant playing better, like as a team. So they could be like the usual Avant 4, except for last split, but I think this time they could be vying for 3rd place with, I guess if we have like power rankings, they would be challenging Legacy in my opinion.
Right. Wow. I mean, yeah, I suppose I can definitely see where you guys are coming from because it was really clean up until it wasn't really clean.
Yeah.
So if you can just like bring it, like just like okay guys, like that image that you said, just don't throw to Baron, just learn the correct setup. And yeah, I mean if you've got that good foundation, then it's a good place to look to build off of. In terms of TM coming back though, do you guys think that was entirely on AV screwing up? Do you think they coordinated well together? Do you think maybe Captain T-Gun was able to have an influence on them coming back?
Perhaps. I think only is probably a bigger I would say a bigger say. I think that only is a pretty high fee jungler coming back in. I like how he plays. I think he's really good individually. Had like some nice looks towards the bottom lane. Like there was one look where he went bot. It turned into nothing. So you probably don't even remember it because it was just like literally a 0 kill lane where he just kind of came in and came out. But I thought that was just like a mess up of mechanics on T-Gun's front. That was like that one gank.
Oh yeah.
But-
Yeah. Oh, I remember that.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Either T-Gun pulled a yellow star.
Oh, that
He just
yeah,
flashed in,
yeah.
flayed perpendicular to the enemy he was trying to flay. He hooked horribly. It was like the old man arthritis mechanics that we joked about T-Gun when I played with him, coming in strong.
Yeah, I never blame. Yeah, I agree. I think if you miss the first play, you're probably not gonna hit the the hook.
Yeah.
But like regardless of that, you probably hit the play. But there was moments like that, and I think that only is a smart jungler. There were a few moments where he was able to track and match up with Sybil, which is like fun to see. That you can still have this like TM versus Avant, which you think is like a low-ended game like in comparison to like Direwolves Chiefs, but at the same time, Tainted Minds coming in with like zero expectations, I suppose, but still, you see like that kind of a high level play. So that's nice to see between the two of them, and I think only goes farther. But with that being said, T-Gun, yeah, you probably don't see. It's so hard. The reason why I say it's hard because this is like first week of OPL, and they probably had like zero practice because of Origin or something. So it's hard to tell if the shot calling's really coming in, because if it is, then I didn't see it in just on that one set.
From
Right.
playing with T-Gun, like I played with T-Gun in a split, like T-Gun unifies a team under like one goal, one dream, which is like T-Gun's one goal, which is a lot of the time just like fighting them. Like I remember in the second game, their composition was Jarvan, Gragas, Oriana, Varus, Galio. That's just like the most high fee engaged team fight comp that you'll ever see. And
Yeah.
I was watching the game with Seb and Scott. And Seb was like getting really excited about T-Gun's Galio. He said like T-Gun's Galio is the best because every single time, like the Praedyth would engage, the T-Gun ulti would just come in straight, and it was like very crisp engages, which is something that T-Gun's really good at calling. However, when it came to like the macro play, it was very difficult, I feel, for TM to do it, especially in that second game. Like Series, you know how Series like got dumpstered by Flares in Game 5 against on Nautilus against Flares on the Fizz. That's more or less happened, except the inverse. Like Flares are just like putting he just got the jungle attention top on their Renekton and just put Praedyth into the dumpster. So it was difficult to see how Tainted Minds could shot call their way. Like they're good engages, and that I credit to T-Gun. But I just think that realistically with Tainted Minds, like there are some players that you think that they're okay. They're all just apart from Only, they're more or less just okay players. And the rest of the roster, like there's not one superstar with Tainted Minds that you can really look towards. Like Shock is a new player. He's a rookie, probably not ready to take on such a big carry role. Similar with Low, Praedyth. He's been around for a bit, but I just don't think he's ever going to be that superstar carry player. So with Tainted Minds specifically, like I think they're going to have to improve their team play, because I don't think they're going to be able to look towards an individual to be able to win their OPL games, which I think T-Gun can do.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair point, mostly because I was surprised with one point. I was surprised with Low how he was able to keep up in the lane, because I didn't see any of these players at all. Maybe they're playing in OCS, right?
Yeah.
Even though I do watch some OCS, so I guess that maybe I was unlucky in that not being able to catch them. They were keeping up in the lane, maybe except for Shock in the mid lane, but yeah, there was a lot of solo queue tendencies that I saw, that there was not like they were just specifically sitting in lane. So Syndra, if she fell behind, she continued to fall behind. There was no one really catching her through it, and they were just getting caught up on like on a macro point. That being said, I think that hopefully the one asterisk is that they did acquire a coach in Cyclone, and like the former Chiefs coach, and maybe they do improve going forward, because they would. I think their goal shouldn't be obviously to take first place in this split, is just to put themselves in a comfortable position to not get relegated, right? And it's like it sucks that it is immediately the first split goal, but sometimes that's how life is. Like when Splice first came into the split, that was their first split goal, is to like not get relegated, be able to like stabilize, and then move from that point forward. And they caught up pretty quickly, obviously, because they went to Worlds. But with Tainted Minds, they have a really green roster and like a completely new like setup that they just need to like work around for the first like 4 weeks. And if you sack 4 weeks, you're probably not going to be expecting much in the standings.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you. Like, if one man is going to do it, though, it is T-Gun. I like the slogan that Nick had before, like, one goal, one dream.
Oh, there we go.
T-Gun.
See, I'll vote for that.
I would vote for that. Although you
Yeah.
don't vote for T-Gun, because he's automatically dictator.
Yeah.
There's no voting
I just remember
process.
one specific game in the OPL promotions where he said like you just said like this, like let's go for Baron, and then it was either myself or Luch where we were like, like maybe I said, can I farm raptors? Or Luch said, can I take blue buff? And he just screamed. He said, no, we're fucking taking Baron. He slammed his fist on his desk and we're like, alright, we're going to Baron.
Alright, let's go, guys. Everybody hands up in the
Yeah.
air. Behind the back.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If there's one man who's gonna make you do it, it's gonna be him.
it's gonna
So,
be Tegan.
hopefully we
That's
see that.
good.
All right, so
Yeah.
we are going to need to go through the rest of this. So what we'll do is we'll go to MVPs for the week. So I'll let each of you guys choose an MVP for the week, a player, and then you know, if you want to say like a brief piece about it, and then we'll move on to some predictions for week 2. So I'll go quickly, and I'll just say that my MVP for the week was Triple. Only 2-0 series of the week. Triple is a monster, incredibly aggressive. Like you said, the only lane which TM didn't really hold up in was mid lane, and you know Triple's the guy that's exploiting that. So I think he was one of the big keys in them picking up that 2-0, which is why I'm going to give him the most valuable player for the week. Do you want to go next, Rez?
I'll take a little bit of time. I wish I would have had that prepared on me. So underprepared, pants down, everybody. I'll ponder on this one. I'll try my hardest not to steal Triple because I won't do that to you. I won't do you like that.
You won't do that to
I'm
me?
a creative man. At heart.
My MVP for the week was Fantix. So particularly in the games that Direwolves won, like Fantix, Vladimir did a lot of work. And something that I think tips me over for the edge for him was his ability to keep Swiffer in the laning phase. Which is no easy task. He was in the game 1 against the Vladimir on the Talia, he almost solo killed Swiffer. He was up a considerable amount of CS early on into the game. And that Chiefs comp really relied on Swiffer leaving the lane and using his Talia ultis in conjunction with the Lee Sin to be able to get those side lanes ahead. And that play wasn't really possible because Fantix was just a very strong player and he kept Swiffer in the lane. And keeping Swiffer in lane is no easy task. And I think that that was the reason why that's the reason why I gave Fantix MVP. Like if you put another player on Direwolves, Swiffer would have likely been able to roam, and it would have been a much different series. So I give Fantix the MVP for that reason.
I think it's fair. Okay, that's fair. Actually, you know what? I like that. I think I'll go funny enough. It's hilarious because he ended up losing. So it would be Swiffer because as a team, obviously they fell through, and I think they looked bad as a team. But I think somehow Swiffer was managed to be able to take on Fantix, who Fantix looked pretty damn well. It's like I guess relatively looked better because he was playing team fight and he team fought incredibly well with his pick. But I think that the Cassio pick and the LeBlanc pick actually played out fairly well with Swiffer. And he was able to utilize it incredibly well, have a lot of map pressure, was skirmishing very well in the solo lane 1v1 versus Fantix naturally because that's when he had the matchup on him up until certain team fights happened. And I thought that he was able to do it just right. As long as the team played around that strength, then he would have done better. But that was just an added, obviously, barrier against him. So I guess I ended up going with the Chiefs player. Sad. It wasn't even the Chiefs player that got a pentakill. So, you know what? Garbage MVP, everybody.
No, I mean, I think that's a fair MVP. Like, it's the most valuable player, right? The person who's bringing the most to his team, and you know, Ray's had a good series, but you know, for me, it's almost always Swiffer, right? He's the guy who's pulling them through at the end of the day. So, you know, I completely agree with. I agree with your reasoning for it. You know, I'm gonna stick with my boy Triple. You know, I stole that from you, but you know, I can see where your reasoning is coming from on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have gone Fire too, but I feel like, yeah, I would have gone Fire. It was just I guess he was just, other than the Italy game, it was just kind of playing towards the team fight, and he's playing a structured game. But so it wasn't as flashy. I still would have gone to him anyways, but I'm just gonna give him that extra shout out. But no, it's Swiffer. No.
Any honorable mentions from you, Nick?
No, not really.
Not
Maybe I'm thinking of Regicide player, but can I give Regicide a Suman and Paradise like a double MVP? I'm giving them a double MVP. I'm not asking for permission. Double MVP, Paradise, and Suman.
Yep.
Without those two players,
go.
Abyss would have very easily cleaned 2-0'd. And because of their dominance in the team fight phase and Suman being able to hold on Luch 1v1, which is no easy task, I think they were very valuable in Regicide, making that series very competitive. So double MVP to shout out double MVP to Suman and Paradise.
All right.
I just want to see that one set that Regicide win, and it's gonna be. I feel like it's gonna happen soon. Like it's gonna happen in week 2 or 3. They're gonna win a set, and it's just gonna be off that Seaman like Paradise carry. It's just gonna happen. It's just an unexplainable event. It's just mechanics. That's all you can really say at the end of it.
They just go crazy.
Yeah.
All right then. So we'll do our predictions for the next week's matchups. So what we'll do is we'll just get your scores from you. If you want to say anything about this, like what you expect from the series, just go ahead and add a little bit on. But if somebody's already said what you've already said, then just feel free to give the score. So Direwolves, for me, 2-0 against Regicide. I'm gonna let you guys explain if you want to. To any OPL viewer that regularly watches OPL, I think this one's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
It would be a miracle if Regicide were able to take a single game.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, go on. You go on.
Yeah. Like Direwolves are just a very classy team. They got the individual players. They got the macro. Regicide have weaker players. They have weaker macro. I think that Direwolves will just take on Regicide in the laning phase, and Regicide will just throw themselves at Direwolves, and Direwolves will just, well, I guess, eat them up and 2-0 them very cleanly.
Yeah. Like, especially since the win conditions in the 2 MVPs you already mentioned, and like it's going to be up against Chippies and Fantix, and the pick bans have been coming in pretty smart, like smart from Direwolves. So even though maybe they'll have weaker matchups, they'll still come out even or ahead, in my opinion. So Direwolves will take it 2-0.
Alrighty then. So pretty clean consensus. Now, if Regicide like 2-0s, Direwolves are all gonna look pretty stupid. But nah, I
think
I don't think
Dials
that's
will look pretty
likely.
stupid as well if Regicide 2-0 them.
That's true. I feel like nobody's gonna be saying, "Oh, those OPL breakdown guys." They're gonna be like, "Direwolves, what the hell?" They're not gonna be focused on us, so we're safe either way. Sorry, we got Legacy versus Avant Garde. Ooh, I don't know. I have to think about this one. I'll let somebody else go.
I gave it
You go on this
to
one.
Legacy 2-1. So, I do think that AV looked good in the last game against TM, but TM are just a much weaker team individually. I think that AV will be able to win a game off of Triple, and perhaps Sybil. Like if Triple gets Syndra, I think that AV have a very, 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 very good chance of winning that game because Triple is absolutely ridiculous on that champion, even if you're playing Echo. But I think that Legacy will just be able to come through. Like Tally is a stronger top laner than Praetus, so that win condition from the top side will not be open. And Legacy have Lost, and I think Lost will just look. He'll be the strongest player on the map. He'll just be the best player on the map, and I think that Legacy will be able to take it out in the 2 games off of the back of Lost and their, I guess, better macro play. If AV do have the same issues in the mid game, they'll get 2-0'd, but I don't think they will. I think they'll come back in the mid game a lot stronger, and I think it will be a competitive 2-1 victory for Legacy.
See, that's a good one. That's a good guess. I will go. Yeah, fuck. I would usually go 2-1 for Legacy. I'll give it to AV. The reason why I'd give it to AV, not just because I'm countering your point, because we already I'm not afraid of copy people. I'm not one guy in a room full of 7 people doing the same test, and I'll copy your test. I would go 2-1 just because, like, off of the earlier point I made about AV versus Legacy, I feel like this is kind of like the battle for 3rd place. And I think that AV surprised me with certain, like, the confidence on Triple and how he's able to play around Sybil. Those 2 should be able to take control early. I know that Claire has had good games and he's had surprising picks up his sleeve. So Legacy will have the tools, but I think that AV should be able to play around Sybil well. I actually give Sybil the jungle matchup, so that's the only matchup I'll give them is like jungle, maybe mid. It's going to be back and forth mid, but I would probably give it to triple a little bit more. So I think even though bottom side is going to be heavily in favor of Legacy, yeah, I would say it's heavily in favor of Legacy. I would say that Avant should be able to spill over advantages they've had in mid and jungle towards the bottom lane.
How about you, Scott?
All right. Well, based on this fixed performance, I can definitely see where you guys are coming from. Like, you guys are looking at that AV potential, but I'm just going to do it based on this fixed performance. So I'm just going to say Legacy too. Even if AV gets big leads, I think maybe they just won't be able to close it out. But yeah, no, I like to be different. You know, I like to not cheat on my tests, Rez.
All right.
Yeah.
That's probably more respectable. I'll tell you right now. That's probably more socially like. You could probably say that, and everyone would be like, you know, that guy. I respect that man.
I just imagine like you in an exam, just walking around like just taking a look at people's papers, just like.
You have an
we
eraser?
told you to sit
have an
down.
eraser?
I reckon Raz would have
I just don't have an eraser.
I reckon Raz would have the swag to just like. Someone's like, why are you taking what he says? He's like, I don't worry about it, and everyone would be like, alright, whatever, it's Raz. Like, of course I'm gonna let him cheat off my test, like, it's Raz. How can I say no?
It's all about.
I'd let you cheat off my test.
You just. It's all about
There
the
we go.
confidence. Real though. I did have like that one person in my class that would cheat off of me, which I guess I should feel happy about. But if I was ever caught, I would be fucked in that class. But I was never caught. Never was I caught. I allowed this motherfucker to cheat on my test, and it just.
You just announced it on the show. What are you doing?
That was a while back. That teacher's
They're gonna
probably just not. No.
Get like fired from your job, like right? Like yeah, we found out like in however old you were when you were much younger, you cheated on the test.
Hey,
we just
they
can't.
cheated on my test. All right, that's.
Oh,
I
they-
was.
You're an
they cheated.
accomplice.
You knew.
Yeah,
You knew.
I was an accomplice, so I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Knowingly let this guy cheat my test.
Oh man. All right. Chiefs versus Abyss. So as a non-biased Abyss fan,
Okay.
Oh, I didn't come
I
out my
feel-
Chiefs jersey.
I feel like
Oh.
Abyss could. Oh,
No, I don't.
have
I
a
don't
jersey?
have it. Yeah, I do.
is that a Chiefs jersey? Oh,
Holy
this is a disaster.
He's way more prepared than me. Oh my
I'll
god.
tell you right now. This is actually the only reason I have this is because all of my laundry is dirty as hell. This is laundry day, so that's my legitimate reasoning. Not because I was on this. It was happenstance, my friends. That was it.
All right. I
Alright.
see how it is. All the other teams, they're the dirty laundry, apart from the Chiefs.
Oh, yeah. Every one of
I
them.
see.
I mean, it just shows that Chiefs jerseys don't get worn around the Razleplasm, so maybe that Abyss jersey is being worn, so Raz is going to predict Abyss to 2-0. We'll have to
I
find
need
out.
an
Well-
Abyss jersey. I think. No. Yeah, I would give it to. Damn, I have a lot of hype for Abyss. Not after that first week, but I would say 2-0 Chiefs, I suppose. 2-0 Chiefs. I want to give Abyss a game. I do, but I don't. I feel like it's not gonna happen.
How about you, Scott?
I think 2-1 to Chiefs. Like I know this could be a little bit of bias coming in as a non-biased Abyss fan, but I just feel like there's so much star talent on Abyss. You know, like
There is.
Rosie, Raid, Luch. I just think there's got to be somebody that carries a game, right? Like maybe Pabu goes huge in a match. Like maybe something happens where they just build up a big lead, and I just think Abyss gonna win. But overall, Abyss looked very messy. Didn't really look like they know what they were doing. Whereas Chiefs, you know, same roster for like how many? Oh well, you know, excluding the 80 carry switch.
Mhm.
They know their macro. They know the game. I think it's going to be a win from Chiefs, a 2-1.
Alright, yeah, now I'll give it to Chiefs 2-1. As much as it disdains me, like I'm like this is the closest team I'm with the OPL, but I'm not gonna let that influence my decision. Like I think that Abyss be able to take off a game. Like I think they have a good stylistic matchup against Chiefs. Just because they like to play really hard off the laning phase, and they should be able to dominate at least 1 or 2 of the laning phase, and I think they'll be able to translate into a victory. But if that ever comes down into the mid game, I imagine and Abyss don't have a fairly significant lead. I imagine Abyss will just walk around like headless chickens. Luch will be farming a lot of camps. Raid will be farming a lot of waves, and Pabu will be off split pushing sideways by himself and die. So I think that will happen if Abyss don't get a significant lead. in the early game, but I think they will at least in one game. So I think it'll be 2-1 towards Chiefs.
Yeah, I think we all expect the Biz to do well this split because that is a good roster they have. Like the roster decisions that they've made. In fact, 100% like keeping on to Luch is the best thing you can possibly do. And then of course bringing in Rosie was also incredibly well done from them. So they have a strong roster and their week one. My expectations was a 2-0 in their favor, of course, and I think that I'm a little bit hurt that they didn't do that. So I'm lashing out this time around and saying that maybe I don't think they make the necessary decisions to be able to take a game off Chiefs. Of course, that could happen. In fact, all of my tips were wrong in the first week, so anything's
Oh
possible, my
no.
friends. Every single one of them. It wasn't wrong in like the results. It was more so like, okay, Daryl's versus Chiefs, that was wrong. Like I thought Chiefs was gonna win, but every single one of them, I was like, oh yeah, I think Abyss is gonna 2-0. I think Avant is gonna come out with a 2-1 victory. Like I just like legitimately chose the wrong score lines for each and every one of them. So maybe this is a curse. Maybe they come out with an extra win. But no, I'm giving 2-0 to Chiefs.
Alrighty. Yeah, I mean, you said Chief Best putting together a really good roster. Nick, can you imagine being a part of putting that roster together? I'm sure the
Crazy.
people, yeah, I'm sure they're geniuses.
Yeah. Maybe they'll make
they
like
might
a
even have their
podcast
own.
together and discuss OPL on a weekly basis and their opinions. Imagine that. Be
Nah, that
amazing
won't
to hear
happen.
their analysis.
Wouldn't happen.
No, wouldn't happen.
All right. So Tainted Minds versus Sin. Ooh. I'm gonna give this one 2 out of Sin. I don't really know why yet. I'm gonna figure that out next.
All right, well, I'll
But
figure it out for you, Scott. Tainted Minds don't have a win condition in this game. I think that the only way Tainted Minds win the game is if what's his name? Praetor gets onto Fura and it goes to 45 minutes in and he just like 1v3s. Not because he mechanically outplayed anyone, but because he got to 45 minutes on Fura. I think every other lane for Sin will lose, particularly their bot lane, Low and T-Gun. I don't think they're particularly strong in the laning phase, and I think that FBI and Rogue are a top 3 bottom lane in the OPL. And they play a lot of bot lanes that have a lot of kill pressure, so I think it will be 2v2 kills in the bot lane for Sin. Ryoma is a very aggressive player. Shock seems to be more passive in the laning phase, and I think you'll just get rolled over by Ryoma. Not in the same way they got rolled over by Triple, but I don't think Shock will have mid pressure. And Only will have a very hard time being able to play to his lanings, to be able to jungle, because his lanes will be shoved in. And Juice plays very well around shoved in lanes, and lanes that are winning, he just continually ganks them and that sort of stuff. So I think that Sin will 2-0. Tainted Minds, the only way I see them winning is if Praetor specifically gets onto Fiora, onto a winning matchup in the Fiora, and he gets to 45 minutes in somehow only 1v3s. I think that's the only way Tainted Minds win.
Yeah. I was about to give it a Tainted Minds too. I didn't even know why I was about to do that. Yeah, I think it is. I would like the only way I would give it to Tainted Minds. Like my reasoning for that was just based off of Praetor as well, right? I thought this was gonna be a great test for Dokla, and if he really is like hyped up top laner. So I actually am gonna give it to Sin simply because it doesn't even matter what happens top side because Ryoma and FBI will play well, and Rogue as well. So I didn't even mention Juice. I think Juice is just playing well, even though he had a bad set. I think Juice has definitely played better than he did in previous splits. So and as long as he has Ryoma and FBI, he knows exactly where he's gonna be playing to.
How about you, Scott? Keeping in mind your prejudice against Sin Gaming?
I have no prejudice against Sin Gaming. No, I gotta agree with you guys. So everything you said, it's 2-0 to Sin. Can't see anything else happening in that series. Alrighty. Is there anything you guys wanna say on the upcoming week, or am I okay to move on?
I hope Abyss wins and actually does show a game that a series that is worthy of their roster. Like if they can actually play, well, it makes the OPL so much more exciting. It means that there'll be more pressure on the top side. So hopefully, I do hope the Abyss plays well because they have individual talent to play well. I think it'll just make the OPL much more interesting if they come off with a good series against Chiefs, because the Regicide series was just not what we're looking for.
And I think For my takeaway, I think week 1 you had a marquee matchup to start off the week, and the rest of them were just kind of like a little crazy. I think it's going to be opposite in week 2, where you start off with a ridiculous matchup with Regicide versus Direwolves, and I think everything else will be like pretty close. I think Legacy Avant should be good, even though I had 2-0 for Chiefs. I think Abyss will show some like good points in that matchup, and I think Tainted Minds versus Sin should be a close. The only way I'll say it's close is simply because I'm expecting Tainted Minds to get better than they obviously were in the previous week, and I think they're only gonna get better based off like development of the new coach, only as a smart jungler, hopefully, and with T-Gun as their support. So it should be a competitive one. It's just not gonna be a win because they're like playing two inexperienced carries. That's about it. So it should be better. I think this is gonna be a fun week where we're like closer matchups are coming through.
Alrighty then. Well, at the end of that segment, I think we should look to move on. And there comes a time in any show. We've done a really good first segment, and the second segment, in my opinion, gets even better. You start to build up this advantage. It gets better than all the other talk shows. And then there comes a time when you just have to just throw that all away. Kind of like Dignitas does in their games,
Ooh.
right? Throw it away at Barons.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So,
well played, Scott.
Topic number 3 is Dignitas. But I'm just gonna give a caveat. We're not actually gonna talk a lot about Baron throws and whatnot. I want to talk to Raz about his time, kind of in the pro scene, not as a caster. Like when you were an analyst, when you were a coach. What your experience is like with it, right? More so than on the results, because that it's a long time ago, and I think that's going to be the thing which is a lot more interesting, right?
Yeah.
So the first question that I have you, because this is the Raz show now. Sorry, Nick.
Okay.
I'm sure Nick will have some questions too, but
I love you, Nick.
The first question I have for you is how did you get into the pro scene? How did you get picked up as an analyst or a coach, for Dignitas?
That's a good question. It gets into a snowballing situation because at first I was a uni student, right? I was a uni student that I just my hobby was obviously playing the game, but obviously just watching competitive in China, LCK, all that. I was like, how do I get involved in the scene? So I wrote a lot. I made articles, analytical. I started out with seeing there was what was it? There was a resume, or at least someone asking for coaching, and it was, or at least an analyst position for Team 8 in North America, actually. So I was like, oh, this would be cool. I'm still in school, obviously, but I think it would be a good hobby to be come in as an analyst position. I came in as a volunteer analyst, so obviously I was volunteering. I was like, I need to buff up my resume anyways. I don't give a damn. And at that point, I wasn't even committed to esports. I was just like, this is a hobby for me. I'm gonna do this on my off time while going to uni, and it's about to finish up as well. So I was just to see where I'm going, just to spend my time. So I come in as a volunteer analyst for Team 8, and then I get asked questions if I wanted to come in as to this one trial session to help a friend in Chiefs. And so okay, I came in and I was I helped them as an analyst for time, and that turned into a hobby as I expected me to come in for scrims. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I get to communicate with the players, so I get to help coach and learn about the game and learn about the players' mindsets, and it felt awesome. Except for the 2 to 7 a.m. scrims, because I'm coming from Canada. So you just have these random I was like, all right, it's summer anyways, so I'm not so I guess I really don't care. I didn't care about my sleep schedule before this anyway to start. But then I kind of had to care at some point because it was middle of summer. I needed to pay off school fee, uni fees. So I was like, all right, I need to actually care about money. So I had 2 options. One option was to work at a bar or work at just find a job which was Indigo or anywhere nearby, right? Or I had an offer from, I think it was Ram Jamal, to work with Dignitas because that spot was recently opened. I decided to go for the esports position because the money was very much similar, and it was where my passion lied. I had a lot of fun coaching players, or I had a lot of fun analyzing the game, and I wanted to get even more in depth on that one. So I worked with Dignitas during the summer, and it was much better for the sleep schedule because now I was coached. Scrim sessions were 10 a.m. to 12 in noon. I was like, wow, that's a 10. That's actual improvement. That's during lunch. I'll take that. So it's almost it feels simple, I suppose, because I just get I got offered off of like snowballing positions, and the reason it felt easy was because taking the first step, a lot of people are very intimidated by it, but you realize how many teams are open and really, really looking for teams. And at that time it was Team 8, but like challenger teams, I see so many um, people like challenger teams like asking, looking communities were like, we need like anybody, because most of the times challenger teams are just like 5 players playing together, right? And as cool as that is, like for those players, they want to be able to get an edge on the competition a lot of times, and rather than the arguments that can be made by like people criticizing each other heavily, they just want to like ask one person how to improve their game, and that's just the position of an analyst. And a lot of the times, analysts probably won't have good enough game knowledge to give them 100% of advice, but they will have enough for them to be like a third, like a third opinion, right? And they will be able to learn along with the team. So it felt like for me it was a snowballing position, and apparently I just turned this one question into like a like a tirade. Jesus Christ! Um, but you go in from one position to the next, and obviously I told you earlier on that I went from DigU once they promoted into EULCS to the NALCS. I went in for that position, and you could tell at some point I just all in on esports because I felt like financially it made a lot of sense. And I wanted to do it. I've always questioned whether I was going to be able to do it permanently. I never really believed in it, obviously. So I keep saying obviously. I never really believed I can like permanently go in esports, but as long as I have a secondary plan to go back on, then like uni or family, then I will just keep going and see where that goes off. So that's essentially how I got into Dig. Is just starting on lower tier, lower teams, just keep moving, keep doing keep pushing out content, like keep writing as I was doing that, and more people will know you. And so you have like enough of a brand strength or like just faith that people think that like at least this guy knows like something about the game, right? That they'll give you one chance, and as long as you hit the trial out of the park, then that's it.
Great. No, I mean, feel free to talk like as much as you want. Like, you know, at the start of the show, I said like everybody loves listening to you. Like, it's the same for me, and like we're really enjoying this right now. The one thing which, it is really nice to hear like saying as an analyst like you were kind of learning along. I think that's a really good mentality that I think some of the analysts sometimes you run into. They think that they know everything, but it's good to see that for you it was like a real big learning process too.
Yeah,
the one thing
let
I
me
am
tell
really
you, I don't know. I don't want to like just to hit on that point because I always had like rants on that specifically. On like there are a lot of analysts that come in and of course they either feel like they know everything or like and they just like they close themselves out to obviously improving their game knowledge. Obviously that's bad. You're never going to go anywhere if you have that, and I definitely have seen some analysts that like get really frustrated when they clash with certain players because they don't know how to like um, instill whatever mindset they have onto that player or onto that team, and that has to change. And so, yeah, there are players like that. And I think a lot of the times, not only does that specific analyst, but also the team has to recognize that as long as the personality and that analyst is driven, they should keep him on because you'll always like you can never just have a coach unless if you just like literally bring a coach from North America into your scene like they did like with Inero on Tainted Minds earlier on. But you have to like build them up through like an analyst position and build them with your team. As long as and if you do that, they'll come out good. Like that's a small. I didn't word it properly, but it's almost as simple as that, and it takes time.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing which I was really disappointed about is you said that you could have been a bartender. I think you would have been the coolest bartender, like possibly in existence. I think that would have been amazing. So the world missed out on bartender Raz, and I think that's a real shame, you know.
Hey, to be fair, I would have started out as a waiter, perhaps, because I think
like
you actually need a
snowballed
license. Yeah, so I probably would have went for a license. All I'll tell you right now is that if I went for that route, family would not be happy. I have a Muslim background, so they would have been like, "What are you doing right now?" I was like, "Oh, I work at a grocery store. That's what I work at." It's like, definitely don't work at a bar, my friend. I do not.
Your mum comes to shop, and she's just like, "Oh, this is a really odd grocery store. What can I buy?" And you're just like, "Well, Just a lot of liquor. Just tons of alcohol.
Definitely not the glass, but if you want to order something within this glass, then I'll like go ahead. Just
Mm.
just it's Coke, but don't drink it. Like,
Oh wow. Um. Okay, so this is actually a question which I guess maybe you've touched on a little bit, but what is being an analyst like over in America? And like, you know, do you like know much about what being an analyst is like in Oceania? Because I mean, it seems to be like a very non-committed role in Oceania, right? Like it's something where people seem to cycle very often between teams. Um, not really super valued. Is it a more of a valued position in America? Is it like what sort of stuff that do you do?
it always depends on the team. Like for me, when I came into America, my role changed. Like, cause in EU, I was a house head analyst slash assistant coach, but in North America, I guess I was only an analyst for Dignitas for about like a month, I guess, until I was like fully head into like a head coach position. For me, it always depends on the team. There are a lot of teams that completely believe and put everything onto a coach. Um, but more often than not, it just like depends on the team style. The reason why it depends on the team style is because, funny enough, the role of a head coach changes based off of what team he's on. Because if a head coach comes onto a team and he has like a headstrong player as is, like let's say if I come onto a team with T-Gun, so I don't like I know that they're gonna make a decision when they're in game, regardless of whether or not it's the right one. Then all I have to do is just tell them what the right decision is more often than not, have the proper drafts and tell them what to prioritize, and I'll have confidence that they'll prioritize it in the game. If you go into a team and they don't have that player, then you have to be able to build a shot caller. And if you feel like you can't do it, and obviously, I think like my opinion on what proper shot calling is more of a team-wide conversation rather than one person. One person called, like for instance, like a high on your team is good. Like that, it's not like that will be unsuccessful, but it just depends on what's working for the team. And more often than not, most teams won't have somebody who's willing to communicate every single thing about the game, every rotation on the game. And sometimes, honestly, most of the times that's not healthy, because you need to have people who are actively thinking in the game. Um, so it depends on what style the coach has, what knowledge the coach is willing to bring on, because every coach kind of has different styles. And I feel like that's a cop-out answer, but I guess I can talk about a little bit of what I brought onto Dignitas. I guess that works.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Like the kind of style I'd bring onto a team would be more so. I would try and be as flexible as possible to my players, and the reason I would do that is figure out who am I working with, what kind of calling are they having, like in the game, and if I feel like um, there's tension brewing between like a certain call, I try to, let's say if a jungler prefers to play Elise, right? Or if a jungler prefers to play like a team fighting jungler, I was like, okay, then I will try and make it so we have the best team fight composition and try and work around the team fight comp. So I guess I'm more of a jack of all trades rather than trying to instill my view of a team. I'll say, well, what is your view of what's your play style and how does it work with the team? So if I feel like a jungler is more so like an Elise player, I'll try and go towards a split push comp or 1-3-1 or like as much as possible and see where that goes. So a lot of the times I mix in, and this, I guess I'm not trying to go into depth because there's a lot in on that, but the example I'd put in, I would try to fit in with a team rather than a team trying to fit into my view.
I wanted to ask about, because for me, I went from being a player to moving into a coach, and like I came into Abyss, and that was a team I had a lot of like comfortability with, and I think that helped me a lot when it came to communicating to the players, because a number of the players I had talked to quite extensively, and so that helped me a lot. Would you say that was a similar type thing with Dignitas? Because you said that you were an analyst before, so um, you'd already been in contact with the players. Do you think that helped you out, and which is why you sort of advocate the whole training up an analyst to become the head coach sort of type role?
Oh, that's a good one. I think With me, it's harder for me because I actually had to work from the ground up a lot of the times. I do agree that it's if you have an analyst that's working with a team long enough, it's easier to communicate with them because you know them. When I was on Dig, I was kind of thrown on there pretty quickly, and I didn't know the players, so being able to communicate with them, or at least them communicating with me comfortably, was harder up until like a month or so into it, or at least like I would say 10 days, and it was easier. And the same happened with Dig. Obviously, once I'm in the house, then it's easier to know who I am, and it's easier to communicate with people. Um, and so I think once you're in a game house, that's not a problem. It's more so online. So for me, my experiences were a little bit more difficult around that. I think Chiefs, like I guess a good example would be Chiefs. When I was an analyst for that team, uh, I was like like right from the beginning, it was hard for me to like just talk to the players. A, I was inexperienced. B, maybe I didn't have as much game knowledge as I do now. Obviously, that's an easy point to say that, but I was definitely growing at that point, so I wasn't confident a lot of the times to give them 100% like macro knowledge, or mostly micro knowledge. But macro, I'll give them examples of what I've seen in other regions, but micro is like another thing. But then I would say after a split, or I would say definitely after one split, I was able to like 100% be able to talk to Swiper, Spooks, definitely like everybody on that team. I was 100% able to communicate with, which sucks. And the reason why it sucks is because that was the split after Rosie left to another team. So a lot of the times I'd be like, if I was able to integrate faster, if I was able to communicate faster with the team and be a lot more like they were comfortable with me, maybe we would have found like I would have been able to impact the team with Rosie a lot easier. But yeah, that's just me blaming myself a lot of the times when I get in there that I wasn't able to integrate faster than I wanted to.
Okay, so just to double check, you were an in-house coach for Dignitas, right?
Yeah.
So you've actually had a experience similar to what Nick and myself have of doing both online and in person, right?
Yeah.
So something which Sharp said on the most recent show was that he doesn't think it's really effective or possible to coach from remote for like remote coaching, remote analyst. How much do you think the impact was when you were in the house with them relative to teams that you coach, or were an analyst for remote?
I guess a good example was I was a remote analyst for Dig NA for about 2 months up until they went to IAM and IAM Cologne or something. That was pretty frustrating a lot of the times because if you're a remote like analyst and you're just like talking to them about what you think went wrong in the game and all of that, and then that's it. Like after the 30 minutes of communication that you have with them, it's harder to be able to reach them or see what conversations they're having from that point forward. Um, it's even harder to like be able to just have one-on-ones, I guess, which I always value. Being able to talk to someone out of the game, see their mindset and how you can solve that actively, because once you get into a house, it feels like it's a all-day job. So yeah, once you get into a house, suddenly you can dictate conversations more. You can make it a easier and healthier environment. And and I guess the example I presented earlier was me being outside of the house, communicating to all of the players who are inside of the house. And another environment, of course, is me outside of the house, communicating to all the other players who are obviously at their own homes. Um, and I guess that was like an old online environment, which is fine, but that also creates the problem of not being able to hit core issues. Like if a mid laner and jungler has problems, and then you finish that scrims and they still have problems, well, you're not going to be able to fix that problem until the next scrim, and that hurts. Meanwhile, if you are outside the house and they're all in the house and you want to be able to fix that problem, the only way you do that is through Skype, like, and that's frustrating as well because if they're heated after a set, then they're gonna look at your Skype. They're not gonna look online. They're gonna touch that shit. They're either gonna go solo queue or they're just gonna walk outside the house, which is a healthy thing to do. But if you know how to solve that problem and to calm people down, you will only have that effectiveness inside the house. To be able to have visual presence, obviously, but to be also like to be able to have one-on-ones, to be able to set a proper environment and schedule, So being in-house coach is like 10 times, maybe 100 times easier. It depends on your team because sometimes your team's the most relaxing team and they don't even need a coach. Sometimes you just have like a Cloud9, like old Cloud9 that are just like, yeah, you know what, whoever their coach is, that guy's just in it, like he's nothing to us essentially. But more often than not, a coach is incredibly impactful, and having him with you or in the house is much better.
All right then. So, in terms of being okay, so in terms of after you were coaching, right? You moved over towards the OPL and LPL to start casting, right? How did that transition like occur? Like, when did they approach you? Or did you approach them? Or how did this job start? Because I mean, you've been a caster for quite a while now, right? Like over a year.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I was approached. Funny enough, I was approached as I got the offer for Dig, but I went with a Dig offer because I wanted to see it through. So once I saw it through, obviously, and we got to um, after the end of Split, I was like, okay, I have options now. Either I go back to school in uni, go back to Canada, or I continue to coach, which I was a bit jaded with, not because of my prior experience, but more so coaching at that time. If you're coaching with a challenger team, pretty risky. If you're coaching with a broad team, even riskier depending on what organization you land. So like esports is still pretty risky if you are not a player, not a good coach or experienced coach, right? Like I already had like a bad image in that sense. So I was pretty set on going back home if I didn't work out as a caster, which obviously I got the offer and I was like, okay, I'm willing to make the transition. So I made the transition over to Australia. I had to get my visa. So I helped out other challenger teams in the meanwhile of doing that because I just wanted to be able to catch up with the meta. I didn't want to just be thrusted in there being like, oh, we're 2 patches off and you didn't do anything for the last how long? So you know nothing. You have no idea what's happening in this meta. So I thought that was great. But when I became a caster, damn, it was hard because you like the first thing you want to do if you're a caster and if you have the game knowledge is you want to tell everybody what's happening on the map. I was like, oh, this guy's that top lane matchup is so interesting, that mid lane matchup so interesting, what the jungler's doing, how he's pathing right now is super interesting. But then like when you get into your first point and you want to be able to dive into it, suddenly some motherfucker in the other opposite side of the map is like skirmishing. You're like, I guess I can't talk about this. Hand off to my play-by-play caster, and you get into situations where you can tilt because you're supposed to communicate properly throughout 40 minutes of the gameplay. But if you mess up once, obviously, or like want to be able to hit on one specific matchup, like so. One thing I learned as a caster is to pick your battles, know when to dive deep into a matchup, and more often than not, just have the idea that it's a cast and not a VOD review, right? Because you want to come into a cast and say, oh, this is my VOD review session. You want to be able to fill it with as much knowledge as possible, but you're just not going to get the opportunity unless if it's like an LCK game. Actually, LCK is usually the best region to do that because they are a lot more slower paced. Yeah.
I like how you have the VOD review thing though. Like, you see, if I was casting, I'd be like, this is my VOD review. Abyss wins this one 2-0. Abyss wins this one 2-0. Abyss wins this one 2-0. This is great.
I thought it was quite interesting where like I want to do my VOD review and then you joined the LPL, which is just like constant fighting and stuff like that. You must
Yeah, especially if you get like two really bad you can say bad teams because they're like bottom of the table and you're just gonna be like, funny enough, your expectation going into that cast is, yeah, good luck, you're not going to be able to get anything out of that one, so just have fun. It's like legitimately a have fun cast where you're probably going to be yelling a lot.
You guys do seem to have a lot of fun though as a casting team. Like, something which I noticed with like Froskurin as well. Like the longest she was at the LPL, There was like a lot more jokes. There was like a lot more fun. And personally, I really like watching the LPL because I really enjoy like that sort of stuff. Like, do you think that could be like a product of the LPL gameplay, perhaps, or do you think
Ooh,
it's
maybe.
just something for you
I think
guys?
I think it's just us. The reason for that is because we're all close friends. I mean, we sit in the same office. We plan like get-togethers a lot of the times. Like it's funny because we all kind of like, oh, what do you want to do tomorrow? Like probably just want to sit at my house. It's like, you want to sit in your house or do you want to have like improve your synergy? Like the damn S word that everyone throws around. You're like, all right, I guess it's like, what do you want to do? It's like, I guess we're watching a movie together. And we play a lot of solo queue. So like not solo queue, normals sometimes. So we're friends. Like we're all friends, which makes it easier. So you don't want to like the worst case scenario is you get on a cast with someone you just hate the guts of. And thankfully, that's not the case with us because we all love each other. So that works out.
It's no drama, no drama in the LPL studio, guys. We're not gonna
Yeah.
hear like Raz like, oh, I hate Frosker and she's awful. Like, it's not coming out today.
Nope. No spicy drama on that one.
Okay. So you mentioned before how you were struggling to talk when you were first becoming a caster, because of like the game like constantly changing. You don't really know what's going to happen. What do you think some of your, I guess, strengths and weaknesses as a caster are?
That's a good one. I guess to hit on the last point, being concise, right? As a coach, you don't have to be concise. You can just say, hey, you know what? After this game that you played, we can start on this point. This point's bad because you just go on for 20 minutes. Your team's just like super tilted, like get this guy to shut the fuck up. It's like, you don't have to be concise, though it would be nice for your team to do that because you can just dive into a lot of specifics. Being concise as a caster is something that I would have to really work on, just so it's like you can hit shoddy points like really fast with certain issues, so people understand where you're going and what you're saying, but you don't have to dive into examples or specifics. And I love myself examples, but I had to cut them off like an umbilical cord because I go way too far with them.
All right. Do we have any strengths?
Strengths, I guess excitement. Funny enough, like I get I like in my own solo queue games, I will be a little bit of a monkey. Like if I'm popping off, I'm getting like 5 kills in a solo queue game, I'm probably yelling. If I'm in the office, there better be nobody in that office room because I'm like actually just like but yeah, I'm very excitable. So if someone like pops off in a game, if they have like an incredible team fight moment, then I will I'll be along with the ride. So I think that's a strength that I've had in comparison to everyone else. And also I guess game knowledge, but that's something that I've had to work to shut out. Not shut out as in not have as a strength, but I'm never gonna have like a VOD review inside of a game, so that's not like it's not too big of a value until you get slow moments.
Right. But I mean, at least it is something which like you will have available. Like if you ever have like a really slow game, because I mean there are a couple of really slow LPL teams, right? Like
Yep.
I remember like last season there was like one which I watched. I can't remember who it was. It was like World Elite versus somebody, and it was like a relatively
It was
slow game.
W. Yeah, W has some slow games. Even like the split OMG surprisingly have slow games. So when you get an OMG game, you can definitely go more in depth in what World 6 or like what their jungler is trying to do. Because you got a lot of smart or creative jungle pathing where it's not what you would expect them or want them to do, but it's like, well, this guy, you can see what his mindset is, looking to invade level 2 or something. It's fun to see that and how they play it out. So being able to communicate that to the audience is always fun to have, because then you
Right.
create value to what everyone else would be like. This is a resident sleeper game. Nothing's happening here. So you can say, actually, there is. I can talk about it because no one's dying across the map.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess something which I did want to ask, because you didn't cast OPL, did you? Or were you just on the
No.
analyst desk?
I did cast the promotion tournament, but that was it.
Oh, right. Okay. So I guess the question which I did have is kind of like what do you like? Were there any like big differences for you in like analyzing and casting OPL versus LPL? Although you did say you didn't get a whole lot of chance to cast any OPL games outside of the promotion tournament. Are there any like particularly big differences
Just analyst
between?
desks. I would say the biggest differences would be team play because it still happens now, I would say, where in LPL there would be even the worst teams in the LPL, or even I would even go further and say LSPL. They still they still play like a team, which would mean that even though they have bad plays, they would all just 5v5 group them to Baron and then die randomly, or they would 5v5 group up towards bottom lane. Like they would play as a team to a fault. And I think that there's, you'd say half or even like four out of the 8 teams of the OPL, there would be problems where they're playing too individualistic, and there'd be skirmishes where you're like, this guy just thinks he can get a solo kill here, or this guy thinks that he can get a good 2v2, where it would be better for him to wait like 30 seconds more so he can get a good 5v5 in the bottom lane, because um, that's how his comp's supposed to be built. But we don't see a lot of strong team fights out of like, unless if you're talking about like Direwolves or maybe even Legacy. You just see a lot of individual skirmishes. So that's the one thing you can really pick up between the two regions.
Alrighty. This isn't really a question which I prepared for you, but it's something which I just thought of. Is there any like game in the history like of you've been casting that really stands out to you as maybe one that you casted really well, maybe a game that you like really enjoyed? Is there any like anything which really stands out to you, or do you just take like each day as it comes and just kind of enjoy everything?
That's a good example. So that's a good question. Funny enough, it's so hard in the LPL because there are so many games being thrown at you, and they all can feel like a blob because you end up casting a lot of them in one week. Uh, I will say that one of my favorite ones are promotion tournament ones of the last split because you get to talk about a lot of the new players coming in. So I did cast, which one was it? There were Young Miracles, I think. I think I casted the Young Miracles game. It's hard to say. It was probably now I guess it wasn't. But I do remember having a lot of fun in that tournament because you're able to talk about the mistakes that they're making, but more so you can talk about the individual strengths that these teams would have. So I kind of gave you a cop-out answer on that one too because I didn't talk about a specific set, but the tournament itself was fun, damn it.
Alrighty. I guess potentially the final one, unless Nick has anything for you after this. But any advice for any up and coming young aspiring casters that are looking to get into things? Anything that you would have for them, perhaps for getting
Okay.
into the scene, perhaps how to get the casting better.
Oh, that's a good question. I would say it's a good example for, I would say, even if you're coaching, if you want to come in as a coach or want to come in as an analyst or you want to come in as a caster, just start anywhere you feel like that's your strength. If you want to start off as writing, there's not a lot of writers out there, and you can even come off as a blog because I actually none of my written work came out as content for an organization. They were all through my own blog, like through my own Tumblr. I just actually just sent everything out through my Twitter. So Twitter's pretty important. Um, so get yourself out there, do whatever you can to do it. If you really love esports, if you love League of Legends, if you love Overwatch, I don't give a damn. Like if you love a game, get your content out there so people know what you think about it. They probably won't care initially, but you'll have friends. Like I'm sure you have friends, and I'm sure you have friends who are willing to retweet your content and get yourself out there. So start there. If you're casting, just start practice casting games. Like I follow really bad players. Like friends. Like my friends probably go bronze. I had a bronze level friends. I casted his games. Like I practiced. Like it didn't go anywhere. I just practice casted it. Like no one's gonna be listening to it except for me. So I just started doing that shit because I thought it was funny to begin with. That was hilarious. Um, and it definitely made me better because I'd be like, oh, I think I should have done this better. Um, and there was one guy who not practice casted. He casted the Demacia Cup, which was not being casted by anybody. And kudos to that guy because you just have to be able get yourself out there, know what you can do, and he found that. He did it. He promoted himself on Reddit, on Twitter. He got himself out there, and suddenly, the guy's followed by a lot of people. And sometimes it's just that easy for you to either be scouted as an analyst because people are looking for analysts, as a coach, or as a caster.
Yeah, no, that's some really good advice. I think for me and Nick though, getting our content out, I think we need to make friends. Sounded like the first
Yeah.
step for us.
Friends.
Yeah, friends. All right, step one, make friends. Step two, then we'll move on. No, that that's some really good advice. I think yeah, I actually do remember. Like, I know obviously we're not really in a particularly big place, but getting the first show for this made, like for OPL Breakdown, was it took the longest. Like it took like 2 months to get set up, and now it's like
Yeah.
oh, like to overcome that hurdle. And now it's like just something we do every week, and yeah,
What's funny about
that's
that is that I was part of a show called China Talk for a long time, or well, not a
oh
long
yes,
time because the show went on for a long time. I came in, I think, for a month, but um, some shows will have a lot of episodes, and it'll take a while before they get out there. But that's just like people may not remember, or let's say even like the first episode. I didn't watch this first episode of this show, but if you just keep putting out content, if you keep throwing it out there when even if there's new shows that come out there, people will be like, well, I mean, it's nothing compared to the old like this show because the quality, like one will have more quality based off experience, one will have more content based off of like guests, like legitimate guests coming onto the show. So always just putting it out there and just being that annoying bastard that just throws it out to everybody. It's like, hey, you should retweet this. And someone's like, what is this guy? Why is this guy getting into my mentions asking me to retweet it? It's like, no, retweet it, motherfucker. I see you. It's like, do you want to promote OPL content? They're like, yes, I do. Then retweet it. so, so it's the first step. It's the first step.
some of it's scary actually, Raz. uh, um, I mean, hopefully, some of these episodes will still be like watchable. Like that's kind of why, like, with the guests coming on, doing a bit of a theme. Like, for you talking about like Dignitas, coaching analysts and casting. So hopefully, even if the game part isn't so relevant, people can just go back and they can click on those sections and the timestamps and just learn a bit about you, which which I think that stuff's going to be relevant for quite a while, right?
Yep.
Whereas the OPL stuff, next few weeks start to drop off. Um, Nick, do you have any other questions for Raz?
How about dealing with community criticism?
Ooh,
I
that's a
think
good
that's
one.
something that a lot of like content creators and especially casters, because they're so out there and there's like Twitch chat. Like, I know with Scott and I, like a lot of the time when we watch casts, specifically one, specifically there are a few casters we don't like.
Yeah.
You just mute it, and how do you
Yep.
like deal with that? Like, some people just saying I don't like this Raz guy, especially when you're new. Like, I don't like Raz. Where's Frescorin? How do you
Mhm.
actually sort of deal with that? I guess criticism, which is quite confronting.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I know I'll come in this immediately as a coach because as a coach, you'll get criticism because if you have a bad draft or if you have a draft that you went in through scrims and it worked well in scrims, like you're like, this is a fucking good draft. And then you get on stage and it's like, well, that didn't work out. People will throw question marks at you and you just have to like, honestly have thick skin. It's almost as easy as that because it's like, if you have faith in your strength and if your team had faith in that draft, they won't blame you. And if you should already be blaming yourself anyways and saying, well, there's another reason why this didn't work out. I'm gonna go hard and for next week or something. Um, and should always be self-critical of yourself. As a caster, I remember when I was an analyst. I remember when I was a like coach, and one of my biggest things was like, yeah, what are these casters saying? I'm gonna mute them immediately. Like I was like, I don't agree with X, Y, and Z. That's like get out. Like I would much rather just look at the game rather than obviously listening to them because I felt like I knew more. Um, Now with that being said, I think I'm in a bit of a luckier situation because I never got those memes in a sense. I don't think I've never heard people muting me. In fact, one of my greatest like criticisms, especially on Reddit, was that this Fraz guy is mediocre, and that was like my first month, and I was like, that's the criticism. Oh my god, someone saying I'm mediocre. I thought I was ass, and this guy was saying this. I was average. I was like, all right, you know what? I'll take that as a positive point. I'll take that. But my thing to people who do get like told that they're muting them, right, is of course, it goes back to the thick skin statement because you're working in a field in which you're constantly communicating with people in the community, which is like Twitter. Like if you have a bad, like let's say if you're on Twitter and if you have 0 followers, you're not going to be popular. Like not going to happen. If you have 0 followers on Facebook, people don't even know you, right? Um, so you have to be communicating with the audience that is essentially going to be criticizing you. So you have to take it on the chin. Like know that people are saying that to you for a reason. So me, I'm always good with taking criticism. I've grown up taking a lot of shit in my life, right? I grew up black. I mean, it's like I'll say that immediately, get that out of the way. I've had to face racism. I've dealt with it. Thankfully, Canada is not the most racist place in the world, so I took growing up. I was like, okay, this exists, and it's not even that bad because I'm not living in a bad environment. So I just knew how to face certain points, and I always challenged to find the best result I can get out of it, right? For instance, if I got into a fight with somebody, obviously you're going to come out heated. And most of the time, your response is not going to be the most ideal solution. In fact, probably 2 weeks from that point, you're going to be like, I should have done X, Y, and Z. And the only reason I didn't do that was because I was pretty pissed off at the moment, or I was pretty heated about at that moment. For me, if I feel like someone's giving me criticism, and I will take about 3 minutes to just think about it, I'll be like, what does this mean? Because I don't want to be heated at it about like anything. If someone ever criticizes me, I'll immediately take that as a good thing because that means they're not talking behind my back. They threw that at me or they put it in a public environment in which I could see it. And so I'll look at that. I was like, okay, they're honest. They're honest people. Can I take anything away from this? Probably. More often than not, people don't hate your guts from the from first sight, right? They probably genuinely don't like how your voice sounds. They probably genuinely don't like what information you're putting out there. And so you have to challenge yourself. Well, is it because I criticized a player that they liked? If that's the case, then there's not much I can do about that, right? But was the criticism valid? Like I just keep going. You have to keep going deeper and deeper to find something positive out of it. Because I would say 80% of the time, the criticisms people throw at you it comes with a valid grain where you can really take that and say, I can actually improve on that. My game knowledge at that point was pretty shit. Like that guy called me out on something, he was probably right. And if he wasn't right, then I definitely didn't explain my point properly, right? I probably just like said something, but didn't say it in a way that people understood what I meant. So sometimes it's harder for other people. Like I know, if you're a female caster, like a Frostgrin, people just won't like you because of your voice, or people just don't like you because you're you, and that's harder to take away from it. So it's more so you have to have a thicker skin, but that's not me, right? So I guess that's why I'm luckier, for how I came into the scene because I guess a lot of people like my voice, and I guess my game knowledge is a little stronger than others, but I had a lot of faults. But when I saw the criticism, I always took it for as good as I could, as well as I could.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, like, in terms of comments and stuff, reading on Reddit, like, there was, like, especially with Frostgurn when she first came on, because I was really excited for Frostgurn to come on. And obviously, like, if this few weeks casting, like, she's improved a lot since then, right? But there were, like, so much stupid shit in the comments on Reddit. Like just people saying, like, random shit, like, about her being female. And I'm just like, this is so irrelevant. And
Yeah.
I think, like, in terms of when me and Nick mute casters, for me, it tends to be more on that game knowledge issue where, particularly if the games go really quiet and they don't have that thing to fall back on. Because in terms of casting, LPL's one of my preferred regions to watch a casting, and I think pretty much all the casters are able to fall back on that game knowledge that they have from elsewhere. But sometimes when I watch casters in other regions, I think that their game knowledge isn't as high, and if the games do go quite quiet, like you said, then they can sort of start to struggle and just try to make fun with it where there isn't fun, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
I'll immediately say that amateur casters, because I watch a lot of League. Probably not like I can make it a lot more efficient. Like for me, if I see like a UK league that's happening or a German league of what's happening, like I'll just watch it. And a lot of the times those casters have real jobs, like actual other like jobs in their life that's not pertaining to League of Legends or something. And so they don't have the time to watch the game. You will watch their casters and you're like, that's a lot of wrong information they're saying on a matchup. So they look bad. And so a lot of the times that's where you can see those valid criticisms. But yeah, that's how life is. And if you want to be able to improve on that, then you get better at it. But if you're like, if the criticisms you feel aren't valid, like for instance, if you're getting invalid criticism, then at that point you have to be able to communicate to peers around you. If you're a coach, talk to your players and see what their criticisms are, or even just other coaches, 100%. If you're a caster, ask other casters in your region or anybody that's willing to look through your games, or even just like, of course, casting with you. If you're a writer, other writers, like just create a community around you that can look at your work objectively. And if they can say that you're doing X, Y, and Z correctly, but more often than not, they'll look at whatever you're saying and say, this is some stupid shit you're saying, then that's more valuable than anything else. Community criticism is great, but there's a lot more shit flying your way, and you have to be able to take what it is and get it. And if you feel like that you can't do that properly, then 100% creating the community around you works.
Alrighty then. I think we should probably look to end up the show there. I just
Okay.
want to say a big thank you, Raz, for coming on. Really enjoyed like listening to you, like particularly for me, learning about your transition to becoming a caster. A lot of those sorts. That was really awesome to hear about. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Okay.
As well as you, Nick. Thanks for coming, Nick.
Yeah, thanks
I
a lot,
know you're
guys,
not-
for having me on.
Yeah, no, pleasure
I'll
having
say
you.
thanks a lot for having me on. I will say, just to finish this all off, on a very random note, because it wouldn't be a Raz moment without something incredibly stupid coming out of my mouth. I remember when this whole fidget spinner nonsense was coming out, right? I was just
Oh,
like,
no.
I was like, what is this? Like, I don't understand what people are talking about. I didn't understand what fidget spinners are. And then when I started seeing these meme videos, I was like, no, this seems like the stupidest shit I have ever seen in my life. And then I finished a day of LPL. I ran into one of the Chinatown, like just like street markets, right? And then I just saw these contraptions. I was like, these are fidget spinners. I'll buy one. And so now I have a Captain America fidget spinner, and I just play with it all the time. So everybody, I'm a conformist, and I'm a shameless one at that. So have have fun with that. Take whatever you can from that.
I think
Alright, we're
on
gonna
that
have
note,
to
we should
edit-
end the show.
Yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna edit that one out. No, nobody will see that.
Yeah. If there are any weirdos out there watching us for 2 hours plus, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, that sort of stuff. But I've never
You
played with a
stole
fidget
my
spinner
line.
before, so
That's fair.
interesting.
It would be a smart thing for you not to.
Alright, anyway, thanks for coming on, and